Hello, this is the Stories Beside channel. I release videos every day for you. Subscribe and click the bell.
Julia, how did you hear the exciting voice from the hallway? That gentle voice Julia would always recognize as her mother's voice. The woman burst into the chamber as if she had just fought 3 dragons to get here. The daughter only smiled weakly. She was lying in bed, coming off the medication the doctors had injected her with in an emergency. She was fine. Her blood pressure's up. Mom. Julia, the mother of 2 kids, asked about the kids. Maria was only 5 years old and David was 6. The mother touched on her daughter. Then she chuckled at the ridiculousness of it. Mom, what are you doing? Julia protested, removing Nancy's hand. How can blood pressure have anything to do with temperature? What do I know? What have those doctors been injecting you with? Maybe they gave you drugs to calm you down. Julia smiled again. Her mother was a terrific woman, but she was very caring. Sometimes she was overprotective. As a child, Julia was always being taken to the hospital for the slightest headache. What if it was cancer? What if it was a dangerous disease? So Julia got used to hospitals, though not by choice. But this time she came here for a really serious reason. High blood pressure could cause terrible problems up to death. Symptoms of such a problem are hard to spot right away. You don't know what's making you sick or giving you a headache, so the people who called an ambulance were not wrong. It was really serious. In the hospital, the first thing she did was to lower her blood pressure, fill her with various pills, and very soon she fell asleep. Her ex-husband had driven her to such a state. And it all started a year ago. It was a cold winter. The clock showed 12 o'clock, but Liam still had no time. Julia spent her days babysitting. She didn't have time to keep track of her husband's affairs. But when they became more frequent and Liam stopped coming home, she really got worried. It wasn't their marriage that would suffer first, but the children. And they were still so young. They won't understand why their mom and dad decided not to love each other anymore. Although there was no love at all. The last few years together, Julia has already regretted marrying this man 1,000 times. He works as a welder and drinks most of his evenings, which he could have given to his children. He spent with his friends in garages and other people's apartments. Julia had been pushing her mother to get a divorce for a long time. Only Julia was sure that Liam would reform. She would help him to get on the right path of goodness and love. But with each passing year, the hope became less and less. Her husband, Liam, was increasingly late for work. That's when she began to suspect something was wrong. Finally, at 2 o'clock a.m., Liam deigned to return. In the hallway, there was some drunken shouting. Then he dropped something at the sound, ran out. Juliet is sleepy, tired. She had spent the whole day with the children and the laundry and cleaning. Today, the little ones were unusually cranky. Ono shouted quietly with a long voice. Julia, children once will be a fool, and you are not ordering me around. Mommy, with nonchalantly replied Liam, taking off his old dirty boots. I am the boss of the house. Liam took off his shoes and went into the bedroom. As he passed his wife, Julia smelled an unfamiliar perfume, but she didn't pay much attention to it. It was too late. It must be her perfume. Or maybe she imagined it, and the strong odor of alcohol interrupted everything. The next day, Julia decided to talk about the situation. More specifically, about her husband's behavior. It's outrageous, she exclaimed. You get somewhere all day long and then declare everything home at 2 o'clock a.m., as if nothing had happened. She burned her hand on a kettle of boiling water and screamed in pain. Mommy, the son was worried. Mommy, you're all right. David wanted to run to help his mother, but he didn't dare because he caught his father's angry look. He gave that poor pancake with such anger, as if he was going to go to war after that. But also, where do you fall? Julia turned to her husband again. He looked at her with the same hateful eyes. It's none of your business. You just have to sit here and watch the kids. Or is that even hard for you? Are children hard, Liam? Of course, I'm always tired, and what are you tired of? The man interrupted her, raising his voice. It was as if these two didn't notice that there were children sitting at the table with them. I'm on this job for a pittance, so you can have something to eat? I take care of our children, and you're ungrateful, screamed Liam. And not even a slap. Julia, I don't want to scare the kids anymore. Didn't even risk it. Maria, sitting at the table, cried, but David remained undeterred. Maybe he wanted to cry too, but tears are for the weak, his friends had told him. And he didn't want to leave his beloved mommy alone. Julia, meanwhile, overcoming the pain from the strong blow, began to soothe her daughter, and then took her in her arms and carried her to the nursery on the way to rock her. Only the 5-year-old boy Liam remained in the kitchen. David was trembling all over. He didn't know what would be done to him. He had never been punished before, but it seemed the time had come. You take liberties like your mama did. You're gonna get it too, only harder. You're a man, aren't you, or are you weak? The boy answered uncertainly. Liam was about to intimidate him with another scary phrase, but Julia reappeared in the kitchen. Her face bore traces of tears, but she held herself proudly. Julia put her hand on her son's shoulder, as if to show that he was under her protection. Sonny, come to Maria, play something, and I have something to discuss with Daddy in a calm, sweet voice, she said. The son looked at his mom, saw her support in her gaze, nodded and ran away, where he was told to go. Julia, on the other hand, sat across from her husband and crossed her arms. Are you cheating on me? She concluded, averting her gaze to the lower left corner. She didn't want to meet Liam's eyes because otherwise she wouldn't have been able to hold back her tears. And in a situation like this, you can't show weakness. What makes you think that? Liam grinned. I smelled the perfume yesterday, and today I found a gold earring in your pants pocket. I hate gold, and even so, there's something wrong with you. And after saying that, Julia finally looked up at the bastard. He dares to ask such inappropriate questions. He's trying to piss her off, but Julia won't let him. He has already humiliated her in the eyes of their own children. How dare you say that? Barely holding back tears, she asked. I don't understand your indignation. Sweetheart, her husband grinned. That's what everyone does. Understand, after the birth of children you have changed, and not only internally, but also externally. You stopped taking care of yourself. Completely tastelessly, you dress, said Stella. Why are you so surprised that I found someone on the side? What kind of asshole are you, Lesh? Pack your things and get the hell out of here. And then Liam smiled evilly and clouded Chelsea's back. Honey, kids need a father. Without a father, they grow up to be incomplete, weak individuals. Is that what you want, for everyone to bully David for not having a father? And then everyone's gonna start questioning who your kid's father is. And then they'll call you a fallen woman. Is that what you want? There was silence in the kitchen. It was broken only by the noise of the road outside. Julia couldn't understand what the man across the street was talking about. But after weighing all the pros and cons, she realized that it made sense. Her greatest fear was that the children would not have a father. She just wanted a happy, complete family. But why did fate set her up with such a jerk? Well, Julia began proudly after a short thought. You're right about the kids, but I'm leaving this marriage just for them. It's over between us, and it's your own fault. Yes, God forbid. Liam said relaxed and left the kitchen, leaving Julia alone. Julia, Julia. Jesus, Julia. Shouted Nancy, almost burst into the apartment, and on the move, taking off her jacket and shoes. Her daughter came out of the nursery only 2 minutes later. Mom, what are you doing here? Julia didn't understand. Julia, I just saw such a thing. I told you. Yes, not tell me you've already boringly ranted. Julia is emptying the laundry basket. It's been a real chore. She'd just put the kids to bed. Laundry and cooking. And here was her mother with some overwhelming news. Liam is cheating on you. Mother said almost cheerfully. She thought the news would make a sensation. After all, she had been waiting for it, waiting for her daughter's divorce from this uneducated asshole. And now the day had come. The real reason for the divorce had finally arrived. But Julia, to her mother's surprise, only shrugged her shoulders as if it were mundane news and went on with her business. Nancy, even dumbfounded, she squatted down to get in line with her daughter. Daughter, can you hear your Liam? Yes, I can, Mom. Julia couldn't stand it and stood up to her full height. In anger, I'll throw my dirty laundry on the floor. He's cheating on me. You're 2 months too late with that news. Honey, I don't recognize you. Nancy said. I don't understand my daughter at all. Your husband is cheating on you, do you hear me? Oh my God, why does it take you so long to realize that? I know why you're still not divorced from him. Because, Mom, I want my children to have a father. You took that happiness away from me. I don't want that for my children. Your father loved another woman. I didn't want to torture myself or you. There would never have been true love in our family if I hadn't gotten divorced. And you're a wimp. Your husband's been cheating on you for 2 months and you put up with it. And takes care of his kids. Shame on you, raising a servant. At least I'm not selfish and take care of my children. Julia screamed. And my children will have a happy family, like everyone else's happy family. Where's the happiness in that? It's hypocrisy. He's an illiterate alcoholic who's not worthy of you. He found a fresher one right after you had kids. He is just like your father, make no mistake. You will regret it. My only regret is wasting my time talking to you. It was my mistake to be born into your family. I intend to save my own. Nancy almost cried at his daughter's words. This speech was like a dagger thrust into her heart. She slammed the door loudly and left without another word. Julia cried bitterly and helplessly, sinking to the floor. Maria and David ran up to her and tried to calm her mother, but she screamed and cried hysterically, not noticing how she was slowly killing herself and pulling her own children with her. One night, sitting behind and which I found recently, as Liam was making less and less money, Julia saw an advertisement for a dating app on the site. It offered to meet interesting people from her city and perhaps find love. Purely out of curiosity, she registered in the application and started browsing through the profiles. Her attention was attracted by the profile of a young guy about 22 years old. She was only 25. Without children, she could be called a girl in the prime of life, especially if she tidied herself up. So she decided to write to this guy. His name was Kevin. He was very athletically built, wore glasses, and seemed very intellectually advanced. The guy immediately attracted Julia's attention with his out-of-the-box thinking. They got to talking. Kevin turned out to be a programmer. In his free time, he played sports and liked to read. But not a boyfriend, but just a dream, as all relations with her current husband were already ruined. The frustrated young mother decided to try her luck here. They arranged to meet over the weekend. Julia did not tell him that she had children or that she was married. So far, this information could only scare him away. The woman decided not to take any risks. She didn't want to scare away her happiness, which may have been so close. Finally, Saturday night came. Liam had gone out again since the morning. But Julia didn't care anymore. She put the kids to bed, asked her good friend to watch them, did her makeup, and ran to the meeting. March was coming to an end, so Julia took the risk of wearing a red mini dress. It was quite warm outside, though the girl was sure that they would go to some coffee shop. Oh, you'll see me right away. I'm wearing a bright blue jacket. No one else has one, Julia joked into the phone. I can see you. See your hand up, Kevin replied. And indeed, in front of Julia stood a guy in a beautiful black coat and glasses. They walked towards each other. Shall we go to the cafe? Julia nodded happily without a second's pause. She could feel like a young carefree girl again. When she was a student, she had never had a shortage of boyfriends. That was probably why her mother had been so terribly anti-Liam. After all, among all the smart, beautiful, and rich, she chose the complete opposite. But at the time it seemed to her that this was love. Now I'm actively engaged in programming, finishing the last courses. Hey, bar work, joked Kevin. And salad. What bar? Are you kidding? Programmers are in great need right now. You're gonna get a job easy. You be hired by any company. Julia supported him. What's your education? I thought you said you were 3 years older. I'm sure you've already graduated. Yes, Julia was a little embarrassed. She didn't finish her studies thanks to Liam either. Love played tricks on her, and now she works as a manager of an online store for pennies. She could have been a very good philologist. She always wanted to work for a big publishing house. But no company would hire her now. No one wants uneducated people like her. I graduated in philology. Now I work as editor-in-chief of a major channel. Julia lied. She was always good at lying. Well, that's cool. I bet you have a lot of useful connections, the guy remarked. The girl smiled and nodded affirmatively. Soon dinner was over. Kevin paid the bill and the couple went outside. You know, I don't like March, Kevin informed her, looking to Doll. The cafe they had dinner at was in the middle of a park, so they walked straight out onto the dark paths, lit only by street lamps. Why? Julia asked. It's slush, here snow, there grass, here earth all mixed up, creating chaos. In my opinion, it couldn't be worse. The girl only silently agreed. They walked down the dark alleys, holding hands like a real couple. Julia felt like a teenager from her first crush. It was such a tender and romantic evening. Suddenly, some kind of crackling sound was heard from behind the bushes. Julia visibly tensed up. Don't be afraid. It was probably a stray dog, and they often pick up scraps here. Kevin reassured her. It had better be a dog or even a wolf, but not the one they saw a second later. An angry man ran out into the road. He was clearly drunk and very aggressive. This stranger pounced on Kostya, beating him off his feet. He began to beat the poor guy, and he could not even respond, because this huge carcass literally crushed him with its superior weight. Julia started screaming. Fortunately, they were not far from the cafe and the guards and staff came running to the screams. They did something to stop the fight. A massacre of fighting guys. Kevin's face was covered in blood. But when Julia looked at the face of the madman who had attacked them, she was speechless. Liam, she exclaimed. You know him? Kevin marveled, stopping the blood with the cold press the cafe guard offered him. I don't, Julia hesitated, but Liam answered for her. Her husband claimed to be a drunk. We also have 2 children, Julia. Who's that? What is he saying? Kevin became more and more amazed. But she didn't answer anything. Julia just looked at her husband with a panicked head. They were taken to the station. Kevin didn't bother to write a statement, and by 3 o'clock in the morning, they were all released to write a ticket for disorderly conduct. As soon as they arrived home, Liam literally jumped on her, slapped her, then took her by the ear and led her to the bedroom. Julia screamed and pleaded for help, but no one heard her. The neighbors wouldn't come here for any reason. Luckily, at least the kids weren't awake. Or maybe they were just afraid to come out of their room, hearing their parents arguing and fighting again. Please let me go, I'm hurt. Julia was crying. You shouldn't have been out in the open. At her mother's screams, David came running. He tried to grab onto his father and push him away from his mother. He got a blunt elbow and flew to the corner and immediately lost consciousness. David screamed at Julia, choking back tears. Liam, please, I beg you. But it was as if Liam didn't hear. He then sat on the edge of the bed and soon passed out. Julia, on the other hand, stayed up all night. The first thing she did was rush over to David and touch his pulse alive. This boy, her son, he is so brave in his small years. A huge bruise had formed on his body near his rib cage. Mommy is just a baby, son. Sunshine Mine affectionately told him mother to calm him down. His ribs don't seem to be broken. Then she waved a special ointment to make the hematoma dissolve faster. That night became crucial. Julia realized she couldn't go on like this. Many innocent people had been hurt today. Now it was not just her. The very next day, Julia called her mother, apologized for her past actions, and asked for help. Of course, Nancy didn't refuse her. While Liam slept. After yesterday, Nancy took Julia's children to her village. Julia cried and realized that the psychotrauma she had received would stay with them forever. But the most important thing now was to get them away from this tyrant. What about you, sweetheart? Nancy asked excitedly, picking up David and Maria. Are you going to stay with that despot? No, of course not. I'm going to go to the police right now and record the beatings. That way the court will accept the divorce case faster. Julia replied. I hope we'll get a criminal record. Suddenly, they heard the bed creak. It came from the bedroom. Liam was waking up. But that was it, Julia said in a whisper. And they left the apartment together with their mother. Julia kissed the children and Nancy goodbye, put them in the car, and drove away. She called a cab and drove to the nearest police station. "Hello, where can I file a domestic violence report here?" asked Julia at the door. She didn't hide her bruises and scratches. Everyone in the station was rather indifferent to such a statement. They had all seen a lot of things over the years. Only one young guy, not even in uniform, who was probably just practicing here, seemed a little shocked. "Come this way, please," calmly said a full-length low woman, coming out of the office that was located to the right of the reception desk. "Do you need medical attention now?" she asked thoughtfully. "No, thank you. I just want to write a statement and start the trial," Julia replied. "For now, you can only write a statement. It will be considered within a week. Do you have a safe place to hide from domestic violence?" Julia thought for a moment and nodded affirmatively. Of course, she would also go to her mother, and it was really dangerous for the children to stay here after everything that had happened. She filled out all the documents, went through a lot of formalities, and finally, the application was created. Then she was photographed from different angles, recording the beatings she received. Julia did not forget to mention her child, who also had a hard time. She was assured that she would consider the application as soon as possible. The girl left the office and opened her cell phone. There were 10 missed calls from Liam, but Julia was not going to answer any of them. He would pay for everything he had done. Phase 1 was over. Now she was going to go to the grocery store, buy something for the road, take the bus leaving from the bus station, and ride to the village in peace. The plan worked like a Swiss watch, until Julia walked away from the ticket office where she bought her bus ticket. That's when she came face to face with her enemy. "Where have you been?" monotonously asked a male bass. "If you don't get away from me, I'll scream." "Only now you won't get off with just one fine," Julia warned him. She was about to go further, but her wrist was squeezed by Liam's hand where the children were going. "Really?" asked her husband. "I won't tell you that even under the most horrible torture. And I know where you are going, not there." Only for a moment, Julia's gaze showed fear. "He knows he'll find them. This man is capable of anything. He can even kill and get away with it." "You're wrong. I'm not going anywhere with improvised and Julia. Although that's a lie. It was a white thread." "Yeah, well, why'd you buy the ticket?" "That's none of your business." "Bastard," the victim said angrily and spat in his face. He dropped his hand in surprise, trying to wipe his eyes. He was already full of anger and rage, and probably wanted to hit Julia again. But there was no sign of her, ran out into the station building. The girl urgently dialed her mother's number. "Julia, darling, what are you doing?" asked Nancy. "Mom, how long do you have to go?" Julia asked excitedly. "Well, 2 more hours for sure. What's wrong?" "I'm turning around right now. We have to hide somewhere in the city. Any idea where?" "Yes," the woman replied thoughtfully. "Probably Betty's." "What's this all about?" "And what I said, I'll explain later. Just hide the kids and write down Aunt Betty's address. I don't really remember where she lives. I'll come over tonight as soon as I can." Julia didn't wait for her mother's answer and hung up. She said everything that was needed. Now it was impossible to delay. The girl realized that Liam would try to get to the children by any means necessary. And only God knows what will happen then. Soon the court would decide everything. In the meantime, she had to hide and keep her head down. She knew the law was on her side, but she had to protect herself. Her husband is completely out of control, crazy, aggressive. He needed to be treated, but it was advisable for him to serve a couple of years in prison first to get his brain back in place. Toward evening, Julia received a message from her mother with an address. She immediately drove up to the place. The house was an ordinary, brick, gray, 9-story building. She dialed the code. She went up to the 5th floor and rang the doorbell. The exhausted mother felt only anxiety and excitement. After all, she hadn't seen her children all day. They must be under tremendous stress being in a strange apartment with a stranger. The door was opened by Betty, a friend of the mother's. She was quite thin, seemed to be suffering from anarchy. "Julia, come in." Betty invited her in. As soon as Julia entered the apartment, the kids immediately ran up to her. Maria was crying, hugging her mom's leg, and David was standing proudly, facing her and smiling. "Thank you for taking care of your little sister." His mother praised him, stroking his head. Julia looked around the hallway. The apartment was a 3-room apartment to the right, leading down the hallway to the kitchen. To 2 sides were rooms with a door. One of them was open. The girl entered there and saw her mother sitting surrounded by 2 cats on the couch. She was reading a book, but as soon as Nancy heard footsteps approaching, she turned her head. Her face immediately seemed to glow. She must have been really looking forward to her daughter and must have been insanely worried. "Julia, are you here?" Nancy exclaimed, threw herself into her daughter's arms. "What are you doing with that impulse freak?" "He was looking for the children. That's why I asked them to hide them here until the court date." "No, but hopefully he'll contact me soon. I'm thinking of hiring a lawyer." Nancy gestured for Julia to sit down on the couch. But Sweetie stretched out thoughtfully. "Mother, a lawyer costs money. I don't think we can afford one. For a case like this, I'm willing to get that money somewhere." Julia answered seriously. "You don't know one thing," Nancy began, lowering her head. "What is it? Tell me. You were right to send me here and not to the village. Liam today, he was there. That's what the neighbors told me." "What did he want?" Julia asked. She knew the answer to that question perfectly well. "He asked people where we were, where David and Maria were, where we could go. But our neighbors are good, and they don't know anything. That's why your Liam is unanswered. He won't take my children," Julia said firmly. A few days later, Julia got a call from the police. A criminal case was opened. The trial was scheduled for the 20th of April. There were still 2 weeks left. By that time, she would have time to hire a lawyer. But in fact, she did not need a paid defense lawyer because all the evidence was there, and there were enough witnesses. However, Julia decided to reinsure herself. As she was informed, Liam was also to receive a summons. Julia did not know where he was, how he was, but she was sure that he would show up to try to take the children away from her. Of course, all of this was taking its toll on her emotional state. She began to suffer from insomnia. Her doctor prescribed pills, but they didn't work. She took a walk with her children once every 3 days and tried not to go outside. Liam, though he was a drunk, was really dangerous. And after beating an innocent guy, Kevin, with whom Julia risked going on a date, the girl thought that he was even capable of murder when he was under the influence. "He's crazy and could do anything. Going out to the store or on errands, Julia. Looking back almost every minute, she was scared to death of being followed." She was literally shaking with it. However, these 2 weeks passed quietly. There were no attacks or threats. But each day pressed Julia more and more. Because of the stress, she didn't eat much. She stopped eating and stopped looking after herself. Sometimes she couldn't even bring herself to brush her teeth 3 days in a row. More and more often she slept in the middle of the day and couldn't wake up for a long time. This whole state was very similar to the beginning of depression. And now, finally, the crucial day of the trial had arrived. And it should happen that on this fateful and decisive day our plaintiff slept. She could not sleep all night, thinking about what we'll say and how to behave, and fell asleep only in the morning. When Julia got up and looked at the clock, her soul sank into the heels. Sweat broke out on her face and her heart raced. As she stood in someone else's bedroom, wearing an old stretchy t-shirt, the trial was already half an hour away from starting. Julia threw on her shirt and black pants in a panic, and surveying her, ran outside and hailed a cab. Her hands were shaking from overexertion, her lips trembling. She knew the judge wouldn't wait for her. The session had started on time, if it wasn't already over. As soon as the car slowed down, Julia jumped out of the car and ran into the building. There they tried to stop her, asking her some unnecessary questions. However, she looked like the guards just let her pass in peace. She just had to show up to the damn court, which had been going on for probably an hour already. When she burst into the courtroom, everyone present turned their indignant gazes on her. Who were all these total strangers to her, stone-faced, paying no attention to this public? She walked through and sat down in the plaintiff's seat. Her lawyer was simply furious, but Julia ignored his gaze as well. She turned her head to the right. Julia saw Liam. The asshole had shown up. He was wearing a smoothly laid out white shirt, jacket, and tie. Yeah, she hadn't even seen him looking like that at a wedding. The scoundrel was so degraded, as if he hoped to win the case. But another thing struck her more. There was a man sitting next to Liam. And of course, it could only be his lawyer. Where did he get the money for a lawyer? He wasn't supposed to have a public defender either. But they didn't stand a chance anyway. That's what Julia thought until the court issued its final judgment. The plaintiff's motion for dissolution of marriage is denied, due to the failure of one of the spouses to appear in court. The plaintiff's request to deprive the defendant of parental rights is also decided to reject, as the plaintiff has not provided sufficient evidence and grounds for his claims. The defendant is ordered to pay a fine of $1,500 to the plaintiff for causing minor injury. Case dismissed. The world seemed to go out from under Julia's feet when she heard this decision. She turned around. No one in the audience was even surprised. The girl looked at her lawyer, looking for support, but received only disappointed. And glaring, he gathered his papers and left the hall. Julia rushed after him. Nick, she shouted after him. Wait. Finally, the girl was able to catch up with him. Please, where are you going? Julia yelled. She was clearly speaking out of emotion. Victor stopped, lowering his head. He was very angry and upset. You could see it in him. Your case was on and simple. We could have not only punished that impertinent man, we could have put him behind bars. But you didn't warn me about your punctuality. And that's how it turned out. I regret getting involved with you, because now I have a terrible stain on my reputation. I could lose my clientele. I have nothing more to say to you. I wish you all the best. The lawyer said angrily and moved forward to the exit again. Julia remained standing outside the courtroom. She could not believe that her own mistake had played a cruel joke on her. Suddenly, she felt very sick. She felt dizzy. Her eyes went black and her legs went weak. Pain seemed to throb in every cell of her body. She was shaking. Julia didn't even remember the moment when she lost consciousness. When she opened her eyes, the first thing she saw was a girl in a white robe and a white cap. She had placed something on the bedside table next to where Julia was lying. As soon as the nurse noticed that the patient had regained consciousness, she immediately rashly jumped out of the room. Julia turned her head with difficulty and looked around the room. It was an ordinary hospital room. She wanted to get up, but felt a sharp pain in her arm. Looking there, Julia saw a wire attached to her wrist. It looked like an IV. The woman tried to sit up, but any movement immediately caused a terrible pain in her head, especially in the back of her head. Suddenly, Julia felt something warm running down the nose of her lip crease. When that liquid hit the tip of her tongue, the girl realized it was blood. She wanted to stop it, or at least wipe it off, searching with her eyes for a tissue. But then a young doctor burst into the room. He was holding a clipboard with a lot of papers. As soon as the doctor saw the patient bleeding, he ran over to her and put a handkerchief to her nose. "Eyes here?" he shouted. The nurses running down the hallway should tilt their heads forward like this. He turned to Julia. She did as instructed. The blood flowed even more. But at that moment, a girl came and handed him a bag of ice cubes. The doctor immediately applied it to his nose. After a few minutes, the bleeding stopped. It was not that Julia was afraid of blood or that she had never had anything come out of her nose. However, such a quick change of events did not sit well with her. All she remembered was that she fell right in the courthouse. Everything else was a blur. "Well, we stopped your blood," the doctor said, smiling. "Now we can get to know each other. My name is Robert. I will be your doctor." The girl looked at him with a meaningless look. Her head hurt so much that it took her a long time to get the meaning of what he said. Robert just raced Julia, writhing in pain. "I have a very bad headache and oh yes, of course. That's what I've come to prescribe you medication for. Give me your left arm, please," asked the boy. The girl held out her hand to him, which had a catheter on it. The doctor unscrewed the cap. He checked something, wrote it down in his papers, and told the nurse to put new drugs into the system. After a few minutes, Julia felt noticeably better. She rolled her eyes in pleasure. It had been a long time since she felt like this, like she'd been beaten over the head with a hammer all day and had needles stuck in her body. And now, right now, she felt completely at peace. There was no pain, no pressure, no pulling. The world seemed to have moved away, narrowed down to the sides of this hospital room. Here, at last, nothing bothered her. She had even forgotten about the doctor's presence. "Well, I see you're feeling better," Robert remarked. "Then please listen to me." Julia opened her eyes and put them on your ears. She was now ready to take in information, so she looked intently at the man sitting in front of her. "You lost consciousness for a reason. You had a hypertensive crisis. In simple terms, your blood pressure was very high. It could be due to stress, poor diet, lifestyle. A lot of factors go into it. But we're not in a physiology class to study all those causes. It is what it is. You have very poor hormones and a concussion from the fall. That's why you were brought to us. Now I'd like to suggest hospitalization. Hospitalization. No, I'm sorry, I have children. How long have I been here? Where are my children? What's wrong with my family?" Julia bombarded the doctor with questions. "Julia, please calm down. The first thing we did was notify your mother of your condition. I'm sure she's on her way here now, and also that your children are fine." "No, he took them. He'll take them. They need to be hidden." "Call the police," the girl shouted. A machine beeped. Behind her, Julia's head ached again and her heart began to pound frantically. "Well, now we've got another blood pressure problem. Your body certainly doesn't need this kind of swing." "Upset," the doctor said. Turning off the machine, he injected something into her vein again. What made the patient drowsy? The last words she heard were, "You need to rest now, and then you'll sort out all your problems." And Julia fell back to sleep. "Mom, where are the kids?" Julia asked more seriously. The smile was gone from her face. "I have them, dear, but not for long, it seems. Liam has declared his desire to take them away. While you are in the hospital." Upset, Nancy replied, "You can't give them to him." "Mom, he's crazy. He could do anything. It's like giving your children to death, but there's nothing you can do. It's the court's decision." "All because of me," Julia whispered. She wanted to cry, but she refrained from crying. They wouldn't help the problem. "Honey, what did the doctor say to you? Did he suggest hospitalization?" "He says there's something wrong with my head. I mean, nerves. Do it." My mother answered right away. "And David? And Maria, that tyrant oppresses them, will destroy them." "Julia, you've only been here one day." During this time, I managed to appeal against the court decision and also talked to Viktor Nikolaevich. He's ready to try again, which I've had time to do. You just have to know how to talk to people. Now please agree to be hospitalized. You'll get help here. I can't see my daughter anymore. I'm so miserable. You've completely lost your appetite. You're so nervous. You're developing depression. And I read it can lead to cancer. Mom." Julia interrupted her. "What are you talking about?" The woman covered her daughter's hand with her palm. "We'll get out. I'll let you know everything that happens. Please get well. I want my beloved Julia back." Julia nodded understandingly and said goodbye to her mother. They agreed to call each other every day. The woman signed all the papers for hospitalization, and the next day she was transferred to another ward. She underwent all the tests, was prescribed treatment, and began her journey to recovery. Her attending physician was the same Robert. When they got to know each other better, Julia found out that he was 30 years old and had been practicing medicine all his conscious life. Medicine had been his calling since he was a child. He really turned out to be a good doctor, very caring, understanding, able to hear and listen just like in the TV series about doctors, and instilled in all his patients complete trust. Here the tortured young mother finally found a long-awaited rest. She often read, walked along the hospital square and paths, and slept a lot during the day. All these simple pleasures of life were not available to her in her previous ordinary life. Her husband never took her anywhere. There was no vacation at all. Work, house, children, laundry, cleaning, cooking. The biggest entertainment, walking in the playground and going to the supermarket. Here in the hospital, Julia felt a breeze of freedom. She followed the regimen correctly, ate right, and tried not to be distracted by the outside threatening world. Every day she called her mother, and she gave her all the news. Liam hadn't picked up the children yet and had disappeared. It was rather strange behavior because he was so eager to have them. But this, of course, was to her advantage. The children lived in the village, at Nancy's everyday walk, played, drank steamed milk. In general, at last they lived a quiet and normal life. A few days later, Nancy told Julia that the appeal had been heard, and she could try again to divorce Liam, as well as deprive him of custody. I couldn't be happier. Finally, Julia could cut all ties with this tyrant and forget him forever. One night, the phone rang. The numbers read 315. It was very strange and frightening. It was my mother calling. My heart went back into my heels and sweat came out on my palms. "Julia, Julia, are you asleep?" Nancy shouted. Now Julia was finally awake. Did something terrible happen? No, Mom's gone. What happened? Daughter. Liam, you're a Liam? A woman sobbed, as if it wasn't the first time she was hysterical. Mom, what happened? I came from the village to check on your apartment. Julia, there's nothing of value left there. He took everything, all the valuable appliances. Your jewelry, gold, even my mother's precious bracelet is gone. Oh my God, Julia whispered in horror. But baby, that's not the worst of it, cried the woman. He somehow got into the bank under your name and took all the savings from the cards. We're completely destitute now. We have no money. The pension won't cover all the expenses, taxes, food, clothes. Now I'm asking the neighbors. This asshole has robbed us of everything. This news was the end of Julia. She was back to square one, to the state from which she had been struggling for a week. She wanted to cry and scream again. Liam had ruined her life, and now he'd sneak off like this. This time he was unlikely to show up in court to dissolve the marriage. He could have gone anywhere. Julia had been saving that money for a rainy day. One day she hoped to save enough to pay her children's university fees or buy them some sort of starter home. She never used that money she had saved for 5 years. How she hated her husband now, with every fiber of her scarred soul. The next day, Julia did not wake up until close to lunchtime. She didn't even remember the nurse coming in early in the morning with the injections. In fact, she didn't feel like waking up at all. The staff seemed to notice. An hour later, Robert visited her. He knocked on the door and slowly entered the room. The guy sat down in the chair next to the bed. Julia, are you all right? He was concerned. The girl gave him an indifferent look and then nodded affirmatively. You didn't wake up as usual today, and you don't look so good. Everyone has bad days, Julia said quietly and sank back into the pillow. I don't deny it, but the same can't be said for you. Your emotional state has gotten much better over the past week, and the physical has picked up as well. My husband stole all my money, all my valuables, and left me and my children in poverty. Julia blurted out angrily, as if this caring doctor was guilty of something. The doctor was stunned by this information. He was silent for a few minutes and then said quietly, I'm sorry. Julia looked at him and smiled in annoyance, and then burst out laughing hysterically. The whole thing resembled a scene from a horror movie. After all, the situation was definitely not humorous, and laughter had no place here. But the experienced doctor knew how to react. Julia, let me take you for a walk, he suggested. Are you at work, Robert? Julia replied indifferently, having finished laughing. Your patients are waiting for you. It's my job to help my patients. You need help now, so I suggest you take a walk, the doctor repeated insistently and firmly. Julia raised her eyebrows as if to show that she didn't care where they took her. She got out of bed, walked over to the nightstand, and pulled out her jeans and rug. Then pulled off her pajamas right in front of Robert Romanovich, which made him embarrassed and look away. He hadn't expected this patient to change clothes so unceremoniously in front of him. I'm ready, Julia said, standing up as still as a soldier. The doctor only smiled, understanding her behavior, and gestured to leave the room. The hospital grounds were quite large. There were many smart corners, cozy benches, small squares. It was a pleasure to walk around, and Julia was really taking advantage of it until she found out about Liam's recent actions. "So how exactly will you help me?" Julia asked when they had walked a few meters. Robert was walking in step with her, but he was much taller, so she couldn't see the expression on his face. "First, pretend I'm your friend," he said. She did. "So Julia, tell me everything in order. What happened? And if I may, the backstory," Robert said in a more relaxed voice. And Julia, without expecting it, told him the whole story. She even liked that someone was interested in her problems, even though it was only her doctor. But now he was really good at playing the role of a true friend. "So you still have a husband on your papers?" Robert clarified. "Yes, that's right. The situation is, shall we say, complicated, or I wouldn't be here. I need to get him to agree to a divorce, because otherwise it's going to get very complicated. I mean, we have kids. You know, a good friend of mine works for a very powerful law enforcement agency. I think he might be able to help you find your husband and the money he stole. That would be very nice of you, but you don't have to do that. After all, I am your friend now, not your attending physician, and I am ready to help you." Robert replied seriously. Julia only smiled back. It was a very nice gesture. On his part, she was flattered that at least someone in this world, other than her mother of course, was going to help her. She hardly had any real friends at all. Julia had always managed on her own. She was even a little flattered that such a handsome young doctor was paying attention to her. She felt a little better after that conversation. The next day, Robert surprised her. He brought a whole bag of ice cream to the hospital. He even remembered that she was very fond of chocolate and bought her a lot of ice cream in that flavor. If he wanted to make her feel better, he really did it. "You know, there's an amusement park near the hospital. Would you like to go?" Robert suggested it, while he was giving the girl her medication. "What about the regimen?" Julia grinned. "I'm your attending physician, so I strongly suggest you have fun." In a stern tone, he said and added more simply, "Well, I have to go now, but I'll see you soon, Julia." Julia smiled back. She realized that Robert was paying attention to her for a reason. He liked her, and she herself could reciprocate such an interesting young man. But things were very uncertain between them. He's her attending physician, so dating him would be wrong somehow, the same as dating a professor from her department. However, Robert was helping her and her family with the search for Liam. Today, just before the ice cream surprise, a very serious man with terribly penetrating steely eyes and a strict expensive suit came straight to her room, asked all the details, photographed the documents, and said that he would take the case. Apparently, Robert was not deceived. He really had connections in the authorities. Julia felt that this time things were getting better, and her health was also returning. Soon Julia was discharged. She seemed to be completely healthy. As fate would have it, Liam was also found on the same day. He was immediately taken into custody until the trial, which was to take place a few days later on May 18. And that day, Julia did not sleep. She had not yet gone to visit the children, who were all right in the village with their mother, and had decided to devote all her time to recovering from such a long absence in the apartment she had left completely livable. Indeed, there was no more washing machine, microwave, or television. But that didn't really stop her from being there. She stopped washing all her things. The floors noticed the new bed. But her spirits were already calmer. In the evening, she got a text from Robert. "Hi, I hope you're awake. Going outside." Julia was surprised and typed the quite logical question, "Why?" "Just go outside, Julia," replied Robert and walked off the net. This really intrigued her. She left her coat and actually rushed to the exit. She couldn't wait to find out what Robert was up to. And this guy was really turning out to be a romantic. As soon as Julia came out of the entrance, she saw a huge bouquet of roses and behind these luxurious flowers hid a smiling Robert. He walked up to his former patient and handed her this gorgeous bouquet. "Julia, I realize you just got out of the hospital, and we saw each other this morning." The guy started off tentatively, and maybe none of this is at all appropriate right now. "But I want you to be my girlfriend." Julia was quite a bit surprised at the proposal. She was sure that sooner or later Robert would ask her to go out with him. Women always sense these things. But in order to do it in such a big way, with such approaches and gorgeous flowers, you know that now you have to make the proposal even cooler. Julia joked. The guy nodded affirmatively, but you could see in his eyes that he was nervous and waiting for an answer. He folded his hands behind his back and shifted from foot to foot. In a way, Julia even liked that he was so worried. It seemed awfully sweet, but she decided not to torture him anymore and gave him a very specific answer. Well, of course, I agree to be your girlfriend. The guy almost jumped for joy. He approached Julia and kissed her gently on the lips, and she was over the moon. How long it had been since she had felt free from all the obligations of freshmen who had just confessed their love. From that moment on, they became a couple, and Robert was not at all embarrassed by the fact that Julia was already married. In a couple of days, the matter would be settled. And if not, he would do everything to get this Liam away from his beloved forever. He was not embarrassed by the fact that Julia had 2 children. On the contrary, he always dreamed of having kids. He was good with children and would be a great father. Robert was really a wonderful young man. Of course, Nancy was sure to like him, but she didn't know he existed yet. Julia decided it would be best to keep quiet about him for the time being, until the relationship with her ex was cleared up. Of course, that news could wait. To her mother, Robert was simply being her attending physician good, and had already discharged her from his care as an attending physician, nothing more. The day of the trial kept getting closer and inevitably came. This time Julia set 22 alarm clocks so that she would definitely not oversleep. There would be no other chance. She woke up herself even earlier than the alarm. Calmly she got up, had breakfast, got ready, and drove to the courthouse. With Robert, they had agreed that he would not appear in public for the time being to avoid unnecessary publicity. There was no telling how the judge or anyone else would react to him. For example, her mother, like Julia last month, saw Liam at another table, to her right. Only this time he was in handcuffs. And today he looked tired, angry, and doomed. Of course, justice was completely on her side this time. Julia's lawyer provided all the documents that were very good arguments against Liam. The ex-husband was assigned a public defender this time. Julia was even a little upset. She wanted at least some kind of fight, even though she knew that she would be the winner of this story. But she thought there would be some resistance from Liam. But her husband was already completely down, resigned to his fate, and he didn't care about himself or his life. To the citizen for theft on a particularly large scale to assign criminal punishment, which entails imprisonment for 5 years. Also in the framework of civil proceedings to assign compensation for the harm caused in the amount of. Read monotonously the judge. The next court hearing took place in another hall. This time about the dissolution of marriage, Liam was no longer here. He was taken away from the previous one and taken into custody. Julia stood again and listened as the judgment was read out. The marriage to citizen Julia is dissolved custody of the minors. David and Maria is fully transferred to the legal representative of the birth mother of the minors Julia, citizen Liam. The payment of alimony in the amount established by applicable law from all types of income shall be ordered. This decision is final, shall enter into legal force. Something else was said, but all words merged for Julia in one simple phrase: everything is over. The trial is over. Her marriage to Liam is dissolved. She and the children were no longer in danger. How relieved was she? Finally, everything in the courtroom came into motion. The judge withdrew. The clerk of the court was folding papers. Nancy immediately ran up and wrapped her daughter in her arms to congratulate her on her victory. "Daughter, this story is finally over. How happy am I? We must celebrate," exclaimed Julia's mother, walking with her to the exit of the courthouse. So strangely pronounced Julia. "I've been here 2 whole times, but I'm walking out of this building with my own feet," she laughed for the first time. Her mother gave her a wary look and supported her under her elbow. But as soon as they were out, Julia was seized with chills, and she almost fainted again. At the bottom of the stairs, where the high steps ended, stood Robert, again with a huge bouquet of roses. Nancy immediately looked questioningly at her daughter, and Julia stood in complete shock at what was happening. Joy, bewilderment, and even anger mingled in her. They had agreed. They had agreed not to tell anyone about their relationship, but Robert had made up his mind for everyone. Julia had no choice but to smile at her mom, take her hand, and walk over to her new boyfriend. Mom, trying to play her part, joyfully began, "Julia, this is Robert, my young man. You know him already, but not in this capacity." At the same moment, the former doctor handed Nancy a second bouquet of roses, which he hid behind his back. Julia gave him a judgmental look, but she couldn't make a scene in front of her mother. Nancy, as her face eloquently testified, must also have been amazed at all that was going on, but the flowers softened her, and she said, "Robert, it's a pleasure. You know, we won the case." "Yes, there was no doubt about that," Robert replied with a smile. There was an awkward silence between them. Then Nancy spoke up again. "Would you like to celebrate with us? It's a wonderful occasion." Robert looked at Julia, who with her eyes begged him not to agree, but of course he did the exact opposite. Of course, the esteemed Nancy helped him mother Julia. Together, they got into Robert's car and drove to Julia's apartment. While the children were being watched by Nancy's friend Betty, the adults were preparing a holiday dinner. Nancy watched TV and cut everything for the olive salad. Robert stood in front of the stove cooking calamari, and Julia was washing dishes next to him. "I still can't understand why you did that," Julia whispered to Nikolai. "Did what nonchalantly?" He interrogated, tasting it. "Is the water salty enough? I told you not to advertise our relationship. This is the time. But you didn't listen to me." "I think your mother liked me," the boy smiled, turning to Nancy and checking to see if she was still here. "Undoubtedly, you know how to make a good impression. But you completely ignored my request. My mother wasn't prepared for this. She's been under so much pressure over the last month. And the last thing she wants to know is that I'm having an affair with my own doctor." "Oh, you say that like you're 17 years old." Julia decided not to continue this argument. She was still hurt that her request was simply ignored. "To what you are to each other," Nancy toasted, and everyone clinked glasses. Already relaxed and happy, Robert and Julia kissed. Now she was determined to forget her silly childhood grudge. Robert had done everything very nicely, and the introduction to his mother had really succeeded. "And let me ask you," Robert turned to Julia, "when did they end up in the bedroom? Where is your father? What's wrong with him?" Julia looked at the boy, upset and depressed. This was clearly not the best topic of discussion. But since he was interested in all the details of her life, it obviously meant something. An indifferent person wouldn't ask such things. Though maybe it was a matter of some alcohol consumption, whatever it was, Julia still wanted to share the story. "He died a short death," the girl reported. "A car accident?" Robert guessed. Julia replied indifferently. "Listen, I have a headache. Let's go to bed." Finally, Julia could sleep normally, without any bad backward thoughts. A week later, Robert asked Julia to go away. It was already summer at the country house. The kids could frolic in nature, and they could take a break from the hustle and bustle of the city. Julia immediately accepted this wonderful offer. Nancy, on the other hand, decided to return to her village. In a couple of days, all the things were packed, and the couple went on their long-awaited vacation. The trip took 3 hours, but it was a lot of fun. All the way they listened to music, talked, socialized with the kids. They looked like a real happy family. The house turned out to be quite large, 2 floors, 5 bedrooms, a great plot, and across the street a pond. There was a vegetable garden, and beds of flowers over which butterflies and buzzing. Bees. Just the truest paradise on earth. Robert inherited this house from his father. He didn't know much about it, but he was certainly a very good man. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to create such a lovely place. Julia had never felt such pleasure in living with someone else, comparing Liam to Robert. She concluded that they were as different as heaven and earth. "Sweetheart, I suggest we go on a picnic. There's a nice lake nearby where there's hardly anyone around. Let's take David and Maria and have a rest ourselves," said Robert, looking into the bedroom to his beloved, who was brushing her hair. Julia agreed. They packed the necessary things, took a ball for the children and badminton for themselves, and drove to the lake. The area was indeed very beautiful, exactly as Robert had described it. Peace, nature, silence, grace. Julia felt like she was in paradise. The children were dancing by the shore, and Julia was enjoying the sun and trying to get an even tan. Suddenly a thought occurred to her. "You're going back to work next week, so the children and I have to leave too." Robert thought for a moment and then answered, "No, of course you can stay here. It's only a couple hours by train, so I can come back here every day." Great, Julia was pleased. "Then I'll do the cleaning, and you can't clean with me. I'm taking a vacation now, and then I want to start running the household. Since you're the one who works here, I'll be in charge of the house in a fair way." A week went by as planned. Robert left for work first thing in the morning. Julia fed the children and sent them for a walk to the daycare center. She could watch them from the window, so she didn't worry about their safety. She decided to start cleaning first on the first floor and then go higher. She washed all the dishes, made dinner, scrubbed the floors by the window, and threw out the trash. The kitchen shone like new. The second floor proved easier to clean than the first. There were no greasy surfaces, so she just dusted and washed the windows. Julia was about to finish cleaning up, but then she saw the attics and doors right in the ceiling of the small hallway. She pulled on the handle and the door fell off almost over her head. The bottom staircase popped out at her. How could she not have noticed the attic here before? Robert had never mentioned it. Julia decided to look in there and see what was in there, to her disappointment. Nothing interesting. She didn't find any dust. Lots of dust, cobwebs, and dirt. It was a very cozy place. If it were cleaned up, you could read. It was rainy in the evenings and the rain would pound on the window. But Julia decided not to touch the attic yet. She had to ask Robert's permission in case it was a family place of power and the souls of dead relatives nested there. And this attic could not be opened at all. In general, Julia decided to wait for the consent of her young man, who was the owner of the house, at dinner. The impromptu family sat in the kitchen and talked. David, all ears, were buzzing about school, because in September he was to go to the first grade. The boy was very worried about it and almost every day asked questions about studies in school. Was it difficult? Would he learn everything there? Julia was tired of answering these questions 10 times, so she just forced him to eat, saying sternly, "When I eat, I am deaf and dumb." Sweet Julia, having had another salad all day, wanted to ask you, "What is that attic you have upstairs?" Robert was a little surprised that such an abandoned room was discovered by zealous cleaners. "No one's ever been up there." 100 years of dust and cobwebs, I guessed, she replied. "I noticed that, oddly enough, and it can be cleaned up." "Cleaned up," Robert marveled. "Well, I mean clean it up," Julia explained, laughing merrily. "Oh yes, of course. I'm sure you'll find a lot of junk that belongs in a dumpster or a flea market, so I'm all for it." He smiled. "But watch out, don't take labor, and wear a mask. Such perennial dust can give you allergies," carefully added the good doctor. On this, they came to an agreement. The next day, Julia was well prepared, armed with mops, gloves, disposable masks, and huge buckets of water. There was a whole lot of work to be done. First, they had to remove all the cobwebs and free the attic from the dust that had been lying there for years. From time to time, she was distracted by children, cooking, and other household chores. So the cleaning took a few days. The first 2 days, she just cleaned the dust and dirt where she could. And on the third day, she started to sort things out. There was an old heavy sled, a broken lampshade, a lot of boxes with yellowed from time food, 100-year-old paper, children's toys. But they were going nowhere, and most of them Julia threw away. Finally, she got to a big sturdy box where she bought various folders, albums, and some ancient documents. The girl decided to open one of them. It turned out to be a family photo album. The photos were full of people she didn't recognize, most likely Robert's relatives. She did not study the face of each person, as there were a whole bunch of photos and almost all of them were joint. She decided to flip through the album. When would there be time? And shoved it back into the box. Finally, she had taken her cleaning to its logical conclusion. Now it was safe to be here without fear of bumping into a rusty nail or breathing in allergic dust. Julia opened the attic window to ventilate and climbed down from the attic. It was time to feed the children. Robert would be home from work soon. The clock was already showing 10:00 p.m. But Robert still wasn't home. Julia began to worry. The children had been in bed for a long time and were having sweet dreams. Outside, a thunderstorm was brewing. The starry sky was covered with a shroud of gray clouds. The temperature was steadily dropping. The atmospheric pressure was dropping. It was unpleasant and uncomfortable to be outside. But Julia sat on the porch in her thin robe. As she slipped the warm plaid over her shoulders, each minute pressed her more and more. Maybe something had happened to Robert. Some bandits attacked him on the way, stumbled and fell into a ditch, lost his way. The girl was terribly worried about her lover. He didn't answer the phone. He didn't answer her messages either. Every cell of her body was nervous and, oh God. Finally, Julia saw a dark figure with an umbrella. Walking toward the house. It was Robert. At first, she was freaked out that the guy was walking. He has a car, but then she remembered that he took the electric train to work. That's very nice. Time in morning and evening traffic. The car ate him up a lot more. When Robert approached his waiting lover, she threw herself into his arms and almost cried. Where have you been?" she sobbed. She was really frightened by the absence of her beloved. Robert lifted her head and looked her straight in the eyes, as if piercing her soul. He was smiling. Droplets of water were oozing from his sweet, good, 2-day stubble cheeks. "Why are you smiling?" Julia marveled. Robert gently pulled Julia away. Ira closed his arms. And then she realized everything. He got down on one knee and took the small box out of his pocket. "No," she stretched out, unable to believe her happiness. "Please tell me this isn't a dream." Robert continued to smile and then opened the box. There was a real white gold engagement ring. "My dear," the boy began formally enough, "we've been through so much together. And there isn't a day that goes by that I don't think of the first time we met. The very day when you were sitting on the bed in the hospital room and trying to stop that miserable nosebleed." He laughed, and then took on a serious expression. "Julia, sweet Julia, I love you terribly much. And every day my love for you grows stronger. Your children are the sweetest creatures, and yourself. You're my angel. In this lovely... No, I'm not arguing. It's really beautiful weather. I want to propose to you. Julia, you will be mine." Julia was bursting with emotion. She cried, rejoiced, got nervous, and cried again, with tears of genuine happiness. Finally, after calming down a bit and regaining her breath, she answered him with a smile on her face. Yes, and reached out her hand. Robert put his ring on her ring finger, and they merged in a tender kiss. It was an evening Julia would remember forever. She had never liked rain, but now it was associated only with something sublime and light, the truest happiness. All the next day she looked at it. This wonderful new piece of jewelry on her finger, symbolizing conjugal love. The ring was indeed white gold, but the best thing about it was the blue sapphire shining in the light. A ring like this was a must-have, and Julia was overjoyed. She was envious of herself. Julia decided not to tell her mother the news over the phone. She decided to visit her on the pretext that she missed her. It was a day off, and the children were left in Robert's care. Julia took the train, and in a few hours she was in her mother's village. She hadn't been here for quite some time, not since her first failed marriage, it seemed. Julia remembered spending all her vacations here, all her early childhood. Before her mother had moved to the city, she had lived here, studied here. Became a city girl only when she entered the institute. Although now this place and village, it was hard to call it. More than 3,000 people lived here, and this place was considered an urban-type village. There was all the necessary infrastructure, stores, hospital, school, kindergarten, and the church was very old, restored, and even a small movie theater. Almost all the amenities of big cities could be found. And here in this cozy, quiet place, Julia exclaimed, and the mother let the girl into the house. "You're finally here. I missed you so much." I haven't seen you in over 2 months. David will be going to school soon." Julia entered the house laughing. Only her mother seemed to have that kind of optimism. She could ask questions right from the doorstep without even waiting for answers. Nancy invited her daughter into the kitchen, poured tea, and sat down at the table. "So tell me, what school are you going to?" The mother continued. "Did you ask about David?" "Oh, Mom is not before school now," laughed back Julia. This reaction very surprised Hope, and that returned the eyebrows and built on her face, not understanding grimace. "And to what, sweetheart? Don't you notice anything?" Julia hinted. Then she would take the mug with her right hand, then fix her hair. "But doesn't Mommy notice anything?" Nancy still looked at her like Julia was crazy. It was even upsetting. After all, she had tried so hard to do everything she could to make her mom figure it all out for herself. Suddenly, there was a twinkle in Nancy's eye. She was getting excited, but she finally realized it. "Pregnant? Shocked?" asked the mother. Julia almost fell off the chair from such an assumption. This was something she had not expected. And how could she even think of such a thing? "No, Mom, what are you doing?" Julia was indignant. Her mother still did not understand anything, and it was getting awkward. Then the girl gave in and held out her hand. Nancy gasped in surprise and looked at the expensive ring. But Robert marveled at her mother. "Well done. That ring cost a fortune." Julia smiled broadly. At last, someone appreciated her young man. Not that she liked to brag, but sometimes she wanted to say so. "I have a man who loves me." Of course, Nancy immediately called all her relatives to share the good news. Julia sat there with a feeling of complete satisfaction. Now she is truly appreciated. She's loved. All her misfortunes are gone after meeting Robert, the man with whom they are so much alike. Like soulmates who were separated long ago. "Mom, will you be a princess soon?" Maria asked as she was being tucked into bed. Julia smiled at her daughter and answered yes. "I will be a real princess in a white dress." She kissed the girl on the forehead and closed the bedroom door. Robert was standing in the hallway. "Well, princess, let's get into your fiddling," the guy joked. Julia jokingly slapped him on the shoulder. "How dare you?" The days went by. It was the middle of August. The children were picking currants in the garden and Julia was reading a book. Suddenly, she remembered that she really wanted to make a cozy corner in the attic. It was not for nothing that she had sorted it out there. When she got there, she found the box where the album had been kept. She was so excited to take a closer look at it. Today was a free day, the perfect time to fulfill that wish. The first picture was of a man with a bushy mustache. He was holding a cigarette and looked very serious. This man left a gloomy impression, so Julia quickly turned the page. On the next one, there was a common picture. There were many strangers standing there. In the background was the very house. The house they were living in now. There were about 10 people in the picture. It gave the impression that this picture was of a huge family. The children here were about 6-7 years old. Suddenly, she noticed a familiar face. Hiding her eyes, she took a closer look. Oh my God! Julia almost fainted with amazement. In the girl standing among the other children in this picture, in a girl in a light summer dress with lantern sleeves, she recognized herself as a child. Oh yes, the same chubby cheeks, the funny pigtails. She looked so happy. Only now Julia doesn't remember any of that. Never suspected she'd been to this house before. No matter how hard she tried, it's like she erased that span of time. She didn't remember these people, not the place itself. Everything seemed completely unfamiliar. Julia was already beginning to doubt her own memory and vision. Maybe she had labeled herself and was a completely different girl in the picture. And now she didn't even have her old childhood picture to compare with this one. But still, something told her that it was her in the picture. Julia decided to wait for Robert and find out from him. After all, this is his house. Surely he would know the history of the photograph. This fact was really confusing and even frightening. Robert came back late. It was raining outside again, and he came in completely soaked. Julia was sitting in the kitchen drinking tea and waiting for him to deign to join her. "Hi, honey." Through force, the guy smiled, kissed his favorite. She responded with a sincere smile. "How are things at work?" Julia asked. Today was quite a hard day. We brought in a patient with a brain injury. All day long they have been trying to get her out. Robert replied in a tired voice. Is that how you work? Don't you think it's time for a little rest? We'll get some rest on our wedding trip, Julia. In the meantime, I'm earning for the trip. Why don't you go to bed? It's late. I waited for you. I'm worried. The weather outside again like that night, she confirmed with a smile on her face. Actually began Julia, moving closer to her lover. I wasn't waiting for you just for this. So intrigued, Robert stretched out. The girl moved the album that was on the table to herself and opened the page. She pointed her finger at the girl, who looked an uncanny resemblance to herself, but Robert only looked at her questioningly. He didn't understand what this child had to do with them. But it was a matter of course. Julia had changed a lot since then. She no longer had that puffy counter, and her hair was a darker shade, but the look of the big brooding eyes remained the same. But don't you see? Julia asked, not understanding why only she could see the resemblance. What should I see? Robert answered in surprise. It's me. Julia confessed, pointing to the girl in the picture. And I can't understand how I ended up here. This place is completely unfamiliar to me. That's very strange, the boy said, taking the picture in his hands and studying each person in the picture. I don't remember it either. However, there he is, me. Robert pointed to the lower right corner. A Pooh Light boy sat on an iron pail and smiled. Where did you get this picture? Julia inquired. After his mother died, all the unnecessary documents and photos were put away in the attic. It's been more than 15 years. Probably the mother or father might have known something about it. But unfortunately, or fortunately, we will never know. Julia visibly darkened. She was very embarrassed by the pictures, and she had hoped that she would find out when she met Robert. But he didn't know anything either. It was terribly frustrating. She would probably never know the secret of that photograph again. So wait. Robert started and then hesitated. It was as if he was considering whether or not to say it. Maybe my sister knows something about it. You have a sister, Julia shouted. She covered her mouth because it sounded too loud. But luckily the children didn't wake up. Yes, Robert grinned. Her name is Kate. Why don't you go see her tomorrow? I'll give you the address. True, she lives in the city, but I guess 2 hours won't make a difference. You have a sister, and you never told me about it. That's all you care about. Robert laughed. Julia was shocked by the information she had received. She had learned so much today. Tell me the address, she said firmly. The next day Julia had breakfast and decided to go to her sister. She wanted to know the truth. These mysteries frightened her. It seemed to her as if all these secrets had some very great significance. Why couldn't she remember anything? Who were all those people in the picture? How did she end up here? She was sure that none of this had anything to do with Robert, that they didn't know each other before they met today. But it seemed that wasn't true. Julia had to take the children with her because they couldn't be left alone at home. They were too young. I wonder if they will remember this house in the future. After all, she and Robert were about the same age as her children in those years. From where? Where did she come from in that photograph? Finally, by an effort of will, Julia pushed those thoughts away. All in good time, and surely she would hear some sort of explanation soon. Tonight she would find out. Julia really hoped that Kate knew something. After 2 o'clock roads, she and her children finally approached the house where Robert's sister lived and before. Screaming girl opens the door. Julia rang the doorbell. Kate turned out to be very beautiful. You could think that she was a model, slim figure, hourglass waist, which is scary to touch in case it breaks. Graceful curls falling to her shoulders. The girl had no makeup on, but she still looked beautiful. Who are you? Kate asked in amazement, scrutinizing Julia and her children. Didn't Robert warn you? Julia was surprised. She was very embarrassed. She had barged into the apartment of a strange girl who was obviously not expecting guests. No, Kate stretched out uncertainly. I'm his fiancée. It's nice to meet you, Julia said and held out her hand. Kate stood there in complete shock. She seemed to be with a man and amazed at the same time. Fiancé? Robert's sister asked. Yes, and I just recently learned of your existence myself. Julia tried to make a joke. I realize this may sound crazy, but won't you let me in? It took me 2 hours to get here with the kids, and we were very tired on the road, as we spent almost the whole trip in trains and buses. Yes, yes, of course. Kate apologized and let them into the apartment. The apartment was very clean. As if it had just been renovated, the white walls were decorated with paintings and there were flowers somewhere. Kate invited them into the living room and offered them tea. Julia and the kids agreed, of course. How come I don't know that my brother has a fiancée? Kate asked with a smile. Pouring tea into mugs. I didn't know Robert had a sister. It just all happened so fast. That's probably why Robert hasn't realized it yet. Don't talk about him like he's a child. I'll talk to him about it. He's always hiding his personal life from me. I always find out from people I know. I didn't really come here to complain. Julia started it. Robert said you could help, but I'm listening, darling. Oh yes, sorry, I didn't introduce myself. My name is Julia. Now, we've been living together a long time. I understand it's on your shared school and home. I don't go there very often. It's mostly where my brother lives. Kate noticed this summer. I decided to clean it up. Julia continued. And in the attic, I found an interesting picture. Julia took the picture out of the pocket of her bag, folded it in half, and held it out. Kate looked at the picture for a long time, smiling. Julia noticed this reaction and asked, "Do you know anything about this picture?" Of course, I was with my father at the time and took the picture of us. Here on the left is my good friend Helen. Behind her are a couple other guys from home, and this girl. And then Kate hesitated. She glanced at Julia, then back at the picture, as if comparing it. Her eyes rounded. It was like she felt sick, because she started to faintly, swaying. There's nothing wrong with you, and Julia was worried. Kate turned her gaze back to Julia on the street. She didn't look so calm and cheerful anymore. She was clearly scared of something. Do you know something? You know, I explained to Julia in this photo. But Kate didn't seem to care about that information. She was silent and ignored all questions. Excuse me, please, I forgot. I have a conference call with my coworkers today, which starts in a couple minutes. I'm sorry, but I have to say goodbye to you. Kate finally spoke. Julia was completely shocked by this turn of events. She didn't understand why that picture had caused Kate such a reaction. It was as if she hadn't agreed on something. But no sooner had Julia protested than she found herself at the front door. At the last moment, she managed to take the picture away from Kate. Sister Robert didn't even deign to say goodbye. She simply closed the door as if in a trance and left Julia with the children on the landing. There was nothing to do, so they walked home. All the way home, Julia couldn't understand what had happened at Kate's house. Why did she have that strange look on her face? Something was definitely wrong. They arrived home in the evening. Robert, to everyone's surprise, was already home. The children immediately ran to the communal table. So who's going to wash their hands? Julia scolded them. The poor things were dragged to the sink while the children washed their hands. Robert asked his favorite, who was pouring the soup, how the meeting with Kate was going. Did you find out what you wanted? No, upset, Julia replied in a tired voice. Turns out she didn't even know you proposed to me. I'm just not on good terms with her, Robert replied. He seemed to be telling the truth, so Julia stopped being angry with him. She was so tired that she didn't even bother to ask what his problem was with her sister. They had dinner and went to bed quite early, but it was not an easy day. Julia couldn't sleep for more than 2 hours because of the intrusive thoughts that were going through her head. If a day ago she didn't care about that old photo, now she was wondering how she had gotten there. Kate must have known something, but why didn't she say what she was hiding? The next morning, Julia decided to go to her mother's house. She persuaded a neighbor to babysit the kids while no one was home and went to the village. Definitely didn't expect to see her. Nancy at this time flashed the vegetable garden and did not expect to see her grown-up daughter in front of her. "Oh my God," shouted out her daughter. "But you gave me such a heart attack." "Hi, Mom." Julia said hello rather indifferently. She had been up all night and her condition left much to be desired. "We need to talk." The woman looked at her daughter suspiciously and she didn't look good. Bruises under her eyes, dry lips. A sickly look has never made anyone look good. Are you sick? Nancy was worried. No, Mom, please, it's very important. You have to help me. They went into the house. The first thing Nancy did was make tea. And then they could sit down at the table. Nancy always said you can't have a dialogue without tea. Tea is a special brew that encourages conversation, especially on heartfelt topics. As soon as they sat down, Julia got right down to business. She pulled out a picture and gave it to her mother, accompanying it with the words, "Do you know how I could have ended up in this picture?" Nancy put on her glasses and took a closer look. The reaction was exactly the same as Catherine's. Nancy threw the picture away as if the devil himself was looking at her. "Mom, what are you doing?" Julia asked, not understanding her mother's actions. "You're supposed to know where your daughter is from. I'm right in this picture." "Yes," stretched the woman enigmatically. "But it's all on me. Enough of your riddles. Who don't I come to?" They respond like they're in a trance. What's wrong with an ordinary photo from 100 years ago? I just wanted to know what I was doing there. You're my mother, you know that. Julia couldn't stand it and said what she thought. She couldn't say such words to Katya because it would be simply impolite. She is a complete stranger. But with the mother, it's a different story. Do they have no secrets from each other, or do they have any that Mom is keeping from her? The woman didn't answer. She sat in complete silence and looked at the photo in front of her, as if going through flickers and memories. "Mom, well, what are you hiding from me?" Julia begged. "You were there when that picture was taken." Nancy raised her eyes to her daughter. They were wet with tears, and Julia was afraid. Maybe she'd done something wrong. Her mother had said the wrong thing. You shouldn't have taken it out on her like that. It wasn't her fault. "Mom, I'm sorry. Don't cry. Please," Julia apologized. "Oh my God, it's just an old picture." And the mother was almost hysterical. Julia must have pushed her too hard. "I can't." Nancy finally spoke up. "Julia, I'm sorry, I can't." "Why not? What's wrong with this picture? Or is there a bad story behind it?" "Daughter, please." The mother sobbed. Now Julia didn't understand anything at all. Why her mother was hiding something so zealously. She's crying her eyes out. "You don't need to know. I wanted to keep it a secret forever. I didn't want Nancy to whine. Mom, it's really important to me. That's my fiancé in that picture. I'm really wondering why we used to know him. I don't remember that. Do you know something? So tell me if it's Tommy's fiancé." The woman started stuttering. "Robert, yes, he is." And Julia pointed to the boy on the right. Suddenly, Nancy had a heart attack. She rolled her eyes and began to breathe slowly and heavily. Julia was very frightened, fearing her mother was having a seizure or heart attack. She jumped up, looking for the pills. After taking them, Nancy gradually calmed down. When she felt better, she went to someone and took out from their also herbal sedative. With shaking hands, poured it into a glass of water and placed it. Then she drank the mixture very quickly in a volley. Then she stood at the table for a couple more minutes, and then returned to Julia. "Okay, to right. I shouldn't be hiding things from you. It's not right. I'd rather you find out the truth, but you don't regret it afterward. What did you ask me?" "Because I'm about to say something that's gonna change your life." Julia was already in the mood for a serious conversation. She was scared and curious at the same time. She would finally find out why everyone was so afraid of that picture. "It's been a long time since Nancy started. It's about your father. You know he cheated on me in my marriage and we ended up divorced. But you don't know one very important detail. His mistress, and he had a secret son, a son who was born. Well, I was still unaware of the infidelity. A few years later you were born, and then the whole mistress thing came out. But Julia, the worst part is that he's your father's secret son. I realize now that this is your Robert." Julia felt her heart stop, and then her breath began to pound at breakneck speed. Was she dizzy? No, she stretched out, and tears came to her eyes. "No, this can't be true. It's a lie." "No." The mother took her daughter's hand for support. Julia's face was as if petrified. It expressed no emotion. Only tears showed her true state. "Mom, no," cried Julia. "The photo was taken by your father when he took you to visit them at their house. Nancy continued, "You and Robert are blood brother and sister. But why? Why doesn't Robert remember anything?" Julia tried to justify herself. "Your father was in a car accident when you weren't even a family. That's why you don't remember it. Your brain blocks out all the bad ones. You don't remember Robert because his birth certificate lists a completely different man, his mother's husband, as his father. Yeah, she cheated on her husband too. These two must have seen each other from afar. The mother was angry. God, no, that's impossible, I couldn't. Honey, we all make mistakes. It wasn't easy for me to tell you all this." "I should probably go home," Julia said, getting up from the table. She was still dizzy, but she couldn't be here anymore and feel this awful awkwardness. After all, both Mom and Julia understood perfectly well what had really happened. Julia was coming out with her own brother, a half-brother with her own father's son. Not only that, she was going to marry him and bear him a child. These vile thoughts and food were climbing into her head, and it was disgusting just thinking about it. Nancy saw her poor daughter off, though she herself was in a terribly depressed state. Not only was she remembering all that long-ago nightmare which she found out about her husband's cheating, but so was her daughter. Their mutual daughter lives with his sidekick. Arriving at the house, Julia hesitated to enter the house for a long time. She did not know what Robert's reaction would be to this terrible news. She paced around the garden in circles. "Julia, you're back. What are you doing here?" "Let's go home," Robert said, stepping out onto the porch. The poor girl didn't even dare look him in the eye. She was ashamed and disgusted. She was sick of herself. The problem wasn't that the man she spent all her days and nights with turned out to be her own brother. The problem was something else. She still loved him, even after learning such a horrifying truth. She continued to love him as her man. She couldn't think of anything that could happen. Poor children, they already think of him as their father, and he's their uncle. Finally, Julia went inside. Robert was sitting alone in the kitchen, looking out the window at the garden. It was a very clear, starry sky today. Every star was visible in this dark sky. The children were already asleep. Robert said in a calm, even voice. He came close to Julia and hugged her, then whispered in her ear, "Maybe we won't sleep tonight." Julia almost threw up at those words. They used to make her feel passionate. Now there was only disgust. Julia jerked away from Robert. "What are you doing?" he asked in surprise. "Sorry, I'm tired. I'm going to bed," she said and walked down the stairs. She wanted to tell him everything, but she couldn't. She didn't have the strength. She just didn't. And she didn't want to cry at the first word. But on the other hand, she felt so bad about the terrible news she was hiding from the man she loved, and what to say she still loved. She lay down on the bed and had already closed her eyes when suddenly she heard footsteps, and then warm hands, embracing her and stroking her. In another situation, she would have smiled and moved closer. But now she only pushed Robert away and got out of bed. Julia looked at him with horror and disgust. "Julia, what's going on?" Robert was starting to get angry and perplexed. "Nothing," she answered quickly. "Julia," the man insisted, and then the girl could not stand it. She cried and sat on the edge of the bed. Robert sat down next to her and put his arms around her. She moved away from him again. Robert was crying. "Julia, it's awful." "What's awful? Sweetie, we can't. We can't be together." Stammering with tears and spasms in her soul, Julia said. "Almost." But she interrupted him with this terrible sudden news, which she uttered so quickly, as if she was afraid she would lose her voice afterward. "You're my brother." Robert looked at her in confusion. "That's not a funny joke at all, Julia." Finally, he answered. The girl sobbed again. It was so absurd that he didn't even believe her. "It's not a joke," Julia cried. "This is a nightmare." After calming down a little, she told him where she had gone and what she had learned. Robert couldn't believe his ears. The girl he loved more than life turned out to be his sister. But he was still a doctor, so he believed. First of all, the facts. That's why he was sober. How did his long medical practice teach him? He didn't lose his temper or go on a bender. He just weighed the pros and cons. "I know you trust your mother, and she would never lie to you." But do you think it might make sense to do a genetic test? Robert suggested after a while. You know, everybody makes mistakes. Can we just take these creepy things at face value? Can we just believe something we have no proof of? Ruin our lives? Destroy our love? Julia was very hesitant at first, but Robert convinced her to do it. The next day, they took their genetic material and waited for the results. The results were not due until a week later, so for a whole week they had to live in limbo. Of course, this had a terrible effect on their communication and on the atmosphere in the house in general. Now one could not hear any silly jokes or laughter in the house at all. Everyone walked around nervous and gloomy. At this time, the couple decided to sleep separately. Robert slept on the sofa in the living room. Julia stayed on the bed. "Mom, when will you be a princess in a white dress?" asked Maria at dinner one day. After these words, Julia almost cried. She looked at Robert, but she did not see any support in his eyes. He just looked away. Was it hard for him to take it all in? "I'm not sure, sweetheart. All in good time," Julia replied plaintively, which satisfied the child's curiosity a little. Finally, the hardest week of their lives was over. The results came in. Robert brought the envelope. They sat down in the kitchen and prepared to open it. "Is it ready?" Robert asked Julia. "Yes," she replied, her whole body trembling. Robert opened the envelope and took out a paper. According to the results of the forensic examination, Robert held it out. They are not close relatives. At that moment, each of them felt as if a stone had fallen from their souls. They turned to each other, hugged tightly, and then kissed as passionately as they had ever kissed. It seemed like never before. This week had been so painful. They missed each other so much. It was a real celebration. They wanted to scream, singing, dancing with joy. They're not relatives. They're not brother and sister. They love each other, and that's perfectly normal. Those words were like a balm to their souls. Soon the couple decided to find out why Julia was in the picture. Maybe Julia's mother was wrong. Together, they decided to go to Nancy's house and talk to her. She didn't know that they had taken a genetic test, so when she saw them together, she almost fainted. Are there really people on Earth who would support such unholy liaisons? How did she raise her daughter? "Julia, Robert, what are you two doing here together?" the mother asked with innuendo. "Mom, don't worry, we're not related," the happy daughter informed her from the doorstep. And they told Nancy that they had taken a test, which showed that they were not related. "Maybe you were wrong," Julia asked. "Maybe Daddy didn't have any secret children." "But I definitely remember," answered the mother with doubt in her voice. They came to the conclusion that they couldn't deal with it themselves. They would have to call in someone who could untangle this frightening tangle of secret children, double marriages, and imaginary parentage. They spent a long time looking for the right lawyer to handle these cases. And after a week of searching, they found one. "I understand that you want to know who is related to whom, brother, husband, and so on," the lawyer asked, taking the couple into his office. That's exactly what Robert replied. "I will do my best, but I want to warn you. Often my clients are upset when the whole truth comes out. Is that what you want?" "Yes," Julia replied confidently. They didn't have to wait too long for a reply from the lawyer. 3 weeks later, he invited them back to his office. "That's not how I figured it out. Just as I warned you, this information. You might not like it," the man said. "So the first thing I found out is that you, Julia, are not the natural child of your actual mother, Nancy." Julia's eyes rounded. She didn't believe these words until she was handed a document that proved it. She was also shown a statement from her documented father stating that by fostering the child, he was committing to the secrecy of the adoption. "Pardon me, but what does all this mean?" asked Julia, not understanding anything at all. "And it means, dear, that we are going with you to the maternity hospital where you were born," said the lawyer. And they really went to the maternity hospital where, according to the documents, Julia was born. There they waited for a long time for an old woman, with whom the lawyer had agreed in advance to meet. She had delivered babies here for 40 years in a row. Now this woman no longer worked, of course, herself, but only sometimes supervised new young doctors. Julia Sokolova. Yes, I remember that case, the older woman said thoughtfully. What case? Julia asked in a low voice. She knew she was close to the truth. Your mother is the one that raised you, that brought you up. Lost her daughter in childbirth. The baby was stillborn. But she didn't know about it. She was too sick. She was in intensive care for 2 days. On the same day, a woman who was a political prisoner died in childbirth. Some high-ranking former official. She was brought to us to give birth straight from the institution where she was serving her time. That baby wouldn't even be given to her relatives. She's as good as dead to them. That's why your birth mother's husband persuaded us to give the child to them. And he signed a statement saying he would keep the adoption secret. That child was you, sweetheart, and I'd like to say that your birth father was a genius. He was able to pull it all off. So his wife never figured it out, and I understand she's still in the dark to this day. My father died when I was 5 years old. Even if he wanted to tell me, he didn't have time. Julia reasoned aloud as she left the hospital. Julia felt a kind of emptiness inside. She had been deceived all her life, didn't know her birth mother of her real family. But on the other hand, she felt relieved. Finally, the whole story was coming to light. All this shocking news caused with her contradictory feelings of relief, but also anguish. After all, she had never seen and would never see her birth mother again. Her father had kept the truth from both Nancy and Julia all her life. Yes, she grew up a happy child, but only until her parents divorced. And her father's life, which ended so early and suddenly. Maybe he planned to tell all that later. Either way, he gave her a good life. Yes, he'd done a terrible thing to hope by cheating on her. But for Julia, for his adopted daughter, he did the best he could. Are you okay? Asked Robert as they drove home. Now they were already living in her apartment. So they didn't have to drive 2 hours to get home. Well, my mom's not my real mom, and my dad's not my real dad either. And I'll never see my real parents. But you are not my brother, exclaimed Julia. That's good, said Robert, looking thoughtfully out the window. But how do I tell my mother? What do you mean? Dad didn't just not tell her. She wouldn't have gotten over it 25 years ago. Not now. She's got a heart condition. Imagine your favorite daughter coming to you and telling you she's not your daughter at all. It turns out she's been taking care of a stranger her whole life. Why a stranger? She's been caring for someone with different blood, but not a stranger. You're the closest thing she's got to family. It's not your blood that matters, it's the person you become. She fed you, she raised you. You're closer to her than she is. She gave you all of herself, and she still does. And I still want her to always think I'm the one she wanted, and the one she gave birth to. You're suggesting I don't tell her. I just want her to be happy. I love her very much, and I know she can't handle news like this. She deserves to be happy. They came home and slept for a long time, like falling into some kind of sleepy well. The last few weeks had been a nervous wreck. The genetic testing, the mysteries, and school prep. But things have been going great from there. David got into a school that's very scary, and coming from the class, enthusiastically told how interesting it is there. The next day, Nancy decided to visit them. She came with a portico, and she gave the children new toys. With September 1, my favorites congratulated their grandmother. Afterwards, everyone had tea in the living room with the very same cake. Well, you found out what the deal is with this picture. Finally, Nancy asked. She came for that, but she decided to disguise her visit as a holiday for a young schoolboy. Answered Julia. It's very simple and funny. That picture is not my Robert, but his cousin. They look exactly alike, and he is my father's collateral son. That's what caused all the confusion. Well, thank God, the woman crossed herself. She'd suffered so much. How many tears did she drink? Robert and Julia looked at each other. They decided to make another very important announcement. Mom, we're getting married, said Julia. Nancy looked at them with delight. She obviously loved the news. After all Julia had been through, she could finally find true happiness. You're invited to the wedding. I think you have a month to prepare and come to the ceremony in the best mood, Robert said, smiling. He held out an invitation to the woman, on which the date and time of the upcoming wedding were written. So it's going to be on the house then? Nancy wondered. I think it will be as good as any wedding in town. The main thing is that this is the place we can call home. It's where my happy life began, Julia said. Preparing for the wedding. Of course, the matter is not easy, but the couple coped with it wonderfully. Julia decided on a classic white dress. It was lush and airy and little. Maria said in delight that Mommy looks like a princess in it. The decorators came to the house and decorated everything in beautiful colors. The place for the exchange of rings was organized right in front of the lake, which created just a fabulous atmosphere. There weren't many guests at the wedding. Some colleagues from work, Robert, Nancy, and all those who helped with the court and further proceedings with family ties. In general, at this wedding, one half of the guests consisted of lawyers and the other half of doctors. Of course, Julia's mother invited a few of her close friends as well. The celebration was small, but very romantic and beautiful. Robert stood by the lake and waited for his beloved. To think of it, he is finally getting married, marrying the one he loves with all his soul. The announcer announced the bride's entrance. Beautiful and tender music began to play. A fabulously beautiful bride appeared. Her photo was solemnly carried by David. He was very proud of his position. He was filled with the realization of his own important mission. Like a true gentleman, he helped his mother to carry the veil. In front was Maria in a ceremonial pink dress and also lush, like a princess, and scattered snow-white rose petals, and smiled radiantly. At last, and Robert saw Julia, her beautiful angelic face. She really was like an angel now, descended to sinful earth. She seemed so fragile and airy, about to grow wings behind her back, and she would fly away into the heavens. But she didn't fly away. She was walking down the aisle to the man with whom she was ready to commit her whole life. Julia was sure of her Robert, and was 200% sure of herself. Now Robert could no longer hold back the stingy male tears. Standing next to him was the woman who had been his life's dream. They were about to be pronounced husband and wife. The guests were looking at them, but they felt completely disconnected from the world. They looked into each other's eyes and saw only infinite happiness. "Good afternoon, honored guests and our newlyweds," said the registrar. "Today, two most beautiful people, Julia and Robert, are getting married. Today is the most beautiful and unforgettable event in your life, the creation of a family. It is the beginning of a good union of two loving hearts. From this day, you will go through life hand in hand, together experiencing both the joy of happy days and sorrows. By creating a family, you have voluntarily assumed a great duty to each other and to the future of your children. Before starting the registration, I ask you once again to confirm whether your decision to become spouses, to create a family, is sincere, mutual, and free. I ask you answer, bride." "Yes," Julia said with sincerity. "I ask you answer, groom." "Absolutely yes," answered the happy Robert. The couple exchanged rings and their lips joined in a long kiss. Some of the guests were very sentimental, so they cried from such a romantic atmosphere. Julia and Robert signed and became legally husband and wife, and nothing could ever interfere with their happiness again.
Subscribe and click the bell.
The apartment was abuzz with pre-wedding bustle. The happy bride put herself in the hands of her bridesmaids and watched in the mirror the last preparations before leaving for the wedding ceremony. "Nora, you are going to be the most beautiful bride." Helping to put on the dress, one of her friends spoke. "Such a gorgeous dress." Another remarked, "It must have cost a lot of money, right?" "Yes," blushing with pleasure, the bride replied. "Edward told me not to save money and to choose one I liked. I couldn't resist and bought this. It fits you perfectly. It looks like it was made especially for you. It really accentuates your figure. It makes you look like a queen. When I get married, I'll buy one just like it. The fit and the fabric are beautiful. You have great taste, Nora." Nora was looking at herself in front of the mirror, her blue eyes shining. Her lush dark hair had been skillfully styled by the hairdresser's hand into an intricate style. "You're lucky to have a fiancé," sighed one of the girls. "And where do such men come from?" One is an alcoholic, the other has money, but he's so stingy. He's lucky to have me." Nora laughed, pleased with the effect on her friends. "Please straighten the hem. There are some creases." "Oh, girls," suddenly she realized. "Give me the necklace quickly. I almost forgot it." "Ah, opening the box," admired her friends. "It's fabulous. Nora, it is wonderful and looks so beautiful on your neck. You could be on the cover of a fashion magazine right now. You and Edward will outshine all the other newlyweds today. I'm so happy." Nora was glowing. "Edward, he's so wonderful, and I love him so much. But it took him too long to marry you, and I don't know why he took so long. I knew right away you two would make a wonderful couple. You even look alike. That's the first sign that you were meant to be together. At least we've tested our feelings, and now there's no doubt that we're meant to be together. We have our whole lives ahead of us. In the matter of marriage, rush is not necessary, so that then do not regret, and do not run a year later in the institution of marriage, only already divorced." At that time the door opened and Margaret came into the room. "Mommy, look at me. How do I look?" Nora walked around the room, letting those around her admire herself. The girls were doing their best. "It's wonderful. How beautiful you are." The woman brushed away an unsolicited tear. "I can't believe you're getting married. It seems like only yesterday you were a baby, and today you're already a bride. How quickly you've grown up. It's pathetic. Mom." The daughter came over and hugged her mother tenderly. "I love you very much. How Father was happy for you." The woman sneezed. "He has already been with us for 2 years, and still in my head does not fit that I will never see him again." "I'm sorry, dear. I've upset you. I shouldn't have brought him up on a day like this. You've got a wonderful event coming up. Let's stop talking about sad things and enjoy it. Come on, Mommy. I miss my father very much. He's always in my heart." Nora confessed, "I miss him too. I know how hard it is to lose someone you've lived with all your life. He was a wonderful husband and father. Today he would take me to the wedding reception. Yes, we have raised a beautiful daughter. It's a shame he can't see that." Margaret smiled through her tears. "I'm proud of you, daughter. I also dream of grandchildren. You and Edward have already thought about children, haven't you? I hope I don't have to wait another 2 years for them." "Oh, wait." She looked at her daughter questioningly. "Where is Edward? Why isn't he here? We have to leave now. Call him quickly. Where is he? I hope he'll meet us at the wedding venue." "Edward?" Nora was glad to hear her fiancé's voice on the phone. "Edward, can you hear me? Where are you?" The girl angrily interrupted the conversation. She couldn't hear anything. There was some noise in the receiver. It sounded like cars passing by. That's good. The mother was nervous, punctual by nature. She hated those who were late. "So we're on the road, no reason to panic. I hope she doesn't get stuck in traffic." "Oh, come on, Mommy. He just got a little out of sync." The bride stood up for the groom. You know his work takes up a lot of his time. Something urgent may have delayed him, but he'll make it. "What work?" "It's not what he has to think about right now. You're having a wedding too." Margaret sighed. They didn't want to have a traditional wedding. With a bride price and contests for the groom, it would have been fun, and the mood would have been festive. You know what kind of wedding my father and I had? The whole yard was celebrating. Something to remember in my old age, but what did you do?" "My dear Mommy," Nora hugged her mother. "It's not fashionable now, you know. People are all busy. They don't want to waste time on old-fashioned rituals." "What's the point of all this? What's all this fancy?" Mother shook her head reproachfully. "Just meet at the marriage ceremony. You are now together for life. It's such an event. Don't be angry, dear. We are not 18 years old. We're adults, modern people. Why do we need these contests, posters, shouting? You also advised me to put a doll on the hood. It's the 21st century. Suddenly, there was an audacious knock on the door. Here comes Edward. With a triumphant look at those present, the bride announced. No, no. Waving her arms, Margaret shouted. Don't you dare come out. It's bad luck to see a bride in her dress before the wedding. Listen to your mother, Nora. Don't go out to him? Mother, Nora laughed. What is this relic of the past? Harry? The smile slipped from her face. We're ready to leave now, but I can't get Edward on the phone. Have you talked to him lately? Do you know why he's late? He wouldn't pick up his cell phone, and now he's disconnected. Nora, with admiration, looking at the flushed girl, the man said, You are amazingly beautiful today. I'm sure you will outshine everyone at the wedding. My heart almost stopped when I saw you. You're dazzling in that dress. I envy Edward. Madam, he bowed jokingly. The carriage is ready. Please follow me. The man bent his arm at the elbow. Nora took him under her arm and followed him to the car. Don't worry about him. Don't overload your pretty head with non-existent problems. Maybe something happened to his phone. That's why he's not answering. I'm sure he's waiting for us at the wedding reception. You should be nervous. Edward can't be late for his own wedding. He's been looking forward to this day. I hope he has. I'm very nervous. Nora? Suddenly one of the girls shrieked. The bouquet! We almost forgot the bouquet. No. Terrified, Margaret shrieked as the young woman prepared to return to the apartment. Don't you dare come back. It's bad luck. Girls, someone take the bouquet. When you leave the apartment, be sure to look in the mirror. Mom, Nora sighed. What kind of prejudice is that? Together with Harry, she headed for the car. Nora, the girlfriends and Margaret followed. We're coming to get you. Don't panic. There's still time to register. Everything will be fine. You'll see in half an hour, this little misunderstanding will be resolved. Expectations were not justified. Among the gathered bridegrooms, the groom was not present. They were approached by friends who cheered the bride. Nora, you are unbelievably beautiful, and your outfit is so gorgeous. Are you upset about something? Where is Edward? Tears welled up in the bride's eyes. Why isn't he here yet? We thought he was coming with you. Don't be upset. She was being comforted from all sides. It's still 15 minutes before the ceremony starts. He'll definitely come, you'll see. He can't leave you just before the registration, can he? Edward is not capable of such meanness. Let's wait, in case something's wrong. He'll come and explain everything. Oh, I don't like this. Margaret was nervous. Call, where did he disappear to? We can't go after him, can we? It's embarrassing. The groom didn't show up at the wedding. He disconnected the phone. Nora said confusedly, listening to the perky female voice of the answering machine. I don't understand. What's going on? He couldn't have turned off the phone. Her friend reassured her. The battery is probably dead. You know it happens. Or did he change his mind about marrying me? There were tears buried in her wedding dress. Don't make this up, Nora. Edward couldn't do that to you. If he's not here, then something serious must have happened. What? What could have happened? How hard would it be to just call and tell him he was running late? How can he warn you if he's in trouble? God forbid. He'll be here any minute. But as time went on, Edward didn't show up. Finally, another happy couple came out from behind the door. Nora. The girl was surrounded by her friends. We should go. It's our turn. Where's Edward? What happened? When was the last time he called you? How could he? That doesn't sound like Edward. You two didn't have a fight the night before. He couldn't just not come to his own wedding, could he? It can't be. He's crazy about you. Leave her alone. Can you see that the girl is upset? Margaret hugged her crying daughter. We don't know what happened to Edward. We're at a loss. The phone is off. Can't anyone tell us what happened? Why didn't he come? Harry, we all turned to the man. You're friends with Edward, aren't you? Come on, what happened? Why was he so mean to Nora? Did he say anything to you? Think back, Harry. Humiliating, Nora looked at him. Tell me honestly, did he change his mind about getting married? Did he just run away from me? Scared? You confide all your secrets to each other. Surely you must be guessing where he is. Please tell me. I don't know what to think. If you're offended, I don't know why. We didn't have any problems last night. All we talked about was the wedding. Nora, I swear he didn't tell me about his plans. I called him a few times, too. His phone's disconnected. He didn't say anything about not coming to the wedding venue. There was no hint that he had changed his mind, or was at all hesitant to marry you. We saw him yesterday afternoon, and he was content and happy, looking forward to the wedding. He said he loved you very much and wished he'd proposed sooner. I can't think why he's still not here. Yes, then where is he? Why isn't he standing here with me? Why do I have to blush in front of the guests? I didn't push him to get married. He asked me to marry him. And now it turns out he didn't need it at all. If he so easily didn't come, and the most offensive thing is that he did it without explanation. What a position he's put me in, and on my wedding day. I don't recognize Edward, or do I not know him well? Nora, calm down. Margaret stroked her daughter's shoulder. Things happen in life. A guy gets nervous, he backslides, who doesn't? It shouldn't have happened to me, Mom, you know? We're not children to be afraid of responsibility. If you changed your mind, why don't you just tell me honestly? Why don't you just show up like that? That's mean. That's low. I don't deserve to be treated like this. Nora, Harry was frantically thinking of what to do, what to say to calm the offended bride. I'm sure Edward will be able to explain everything. We just have to wait for him. We'll all calm down and be patient. Tell me, the girl attacked Harry. What do we do now? How long do we wait? It's clear he's not coming. He left me at the doorstep of the marriage institution. How can I bear the shame? Now everyone's going to point fingers. You abandoned girl. I wonder what he's doing, while I'm standing here like a fool waiting for him. And tomorrow the whole firm will laugh at me when I show up at work. Pull yourself together, please. Let's be logical. He couldn't have left you. It's as clear as day. I think something happened to him. Shit. Edward was nervous. I'm so screwed. How could such a stupid situation happen to me? He stretched his hand up, hoping that a miracle would happen and the phone would catch the network so he could call Nora and explain. You'd have to get stuck in an elevator on the day of your own wedding. Can you imagine what's happening to Nora? But it's not my fault the elevator broke down and the repair crew is in no hurry to get me out of here. I wonder how much longer I'll have to stay here. He dialed the dispatcher's number. Girl, honey, do you realize that I have to get out of here as soon as possible? How long do I have to wait? Are you gonna do anything about it? Listen to me. A woman's voice on the other end of the line answered him indifferently. Stop calling. This is the 5th time in the last half hour you've dialed the control room. You're wasting the line. I told you very clearly, the master will come when he can. What's not to understand? Your situation is not so critical, and in the next house stuck Mom with a baby in her arms, and her first priority we must save. Is that clear? Just wait. It's not my fault that elevators are always breaking down, and the master is one for several houses. Nothing will happen to you if you stay in the locked cabin a little longer. My situation is critical too, shouted Edward. My fiancé is waiting for me at the wedding reception. The guests, the table in the restaurant is booked, and I'm stuck here, though I should be putting a ring on my beloved's finger. Do you realize that by your grace, the family is ruined before it's even born? She's not gonna believe I'm stuck here by accident. Imagine yourself in her shoes, have some compassion. You've got to think of something like that. The dispatcher said angrily, "It's his wedding. They could have come up with something more original." You don't believe me? The man was indignant. If my fiancé leaves me, it will be on your conscience. You have no heart. Stop occupying the line. I cannot jump above my head. As soon as the master is free, I will immediately send to you. But in the meantime, be patient. Wait, said the woman and hung up. That's great. Annoyed Edward banged his fist on the elevator wall. It's the worst thing in the world, waiting and catching up. I hope Nora will understand and forgive me for being stuck here. What if she thinks I'm a coward? He clutched his head with his hands. I'm so screwed. I'm so screwed. Guilt-free. Some more time passed, and suddenly the elevator came to life and moved. Well, recluse, come on out. The elevator doors opened, and in front of Edward was an elderly smiling master in special clothes, with a tool case in his hands. Sorry, brother, I couldn't get you out earlier. Edward stormed out of the booth, nearly knocking the man to the ground. What a freak! What's he doing running like that? The foreman shook his head disapprovingly. So what if he sat in the elevator for a while? The world didn't collapse. The unhappy groom dialed the number of the cab. To the wedding reception. He said as he got into the car, "Are you late for the wedding?" Looking in the rearview mirror at the young man, in a strict suit with a boutonniere on his jacket lapel, the driver asked, "You're already late." Edward said bitterly, "I'm afraid everyone's already gone. Listen, friend." He turned to the driver. "Wait for me." "All right, but don't take too long." The unmarried groom flew down the stairs in one fell swoop and burst into the wedding hall. "Where is it?" he asked and hesitated. "What do you want?" tiredly asked the woman, collecting papers from the table. Everyone went away who wanted to be married, and you were looking for whom? A bride? Edward waved his hand hopelessly and went to the cab. On the way, dialing a friend's cell phone number. "Harry, where are you?" "Edward, at last. Where have you been?" "I'll tell you later." "Where's Nora?" "Well, we're at the restaurant, celebrating a wedding, so it's not a waste." "Whose wedding?" The man got in the car. "Drive to the restaurant." He told the driver and gave the address. When the man entered the hall, the guests immediately quieted down in anticipation, looked at each other, whispered, discussing the appearance of the long-awaited groom. "Nora?" A friend touched the young woman's arm. "Edward is here." "Oh my God!" Nora splashed her hands. "Look who's here!" "Edward, you're just in time as always, and we've been waiting for you." "Daughter." Her mother warned her. "Stop. Don't make a scene. First find out why he was late. Let him explain. I hope he has something to say for himself." "What's the matter, Mommy?" "Why do I need a scandal?" "Why spoil the party?" "Come in, Edward. You'll be a guest at our wedding." "What are you talking about?" "The groom is worried." "What do you mean, your wedding?" "What is it?" "I'm getting married." "Congratulations. I got married, just like I wanted. How could you get married if I wasn't here? That's exactly why. Nora came right up to Edward. I finally got married, with you as a bride. I'd have had to wait until I retired, and I was tired of waiting for you. Wait a minute. Nora squinted angrily. Let me see. How many times have we postponed our wedding? 3 times, because Edward wanted us to. And he always had a very convincing reason to say no, and now he's finally decided to make me happy. Everything seemed ready for the long-awaited event. The bride circled the hall. The guests are invited. The wedding is scheduled. The restaurant is booked, and suddenly interferes with his majesty of chance. The groom did not show up at his own wedding. Ay, what a nuisance. The bride is weeping. The guests are perplexed. What scandal? Wait. Edward tried to stop her, grabbed her by the arms, turned her around. I can explain everything. There was a funny situation. I got stuck in the elevator. Honestly, I can even bring a certificate from the dispatcher. It's a completely stupid story, like in the joke. And I don't want to hear it. Nora broke free of her ex-fiance's grip. You think it's funny? Let's laugh together. We have a party, guests are here. Tables are booked. We can't waste the good. Friends, she addressed the crowd, who froze, not knowing what to do in such a situation. Let's help ourselves. Everything is paid for. Smile. Toastmaster, invite guests to the table. I want to drink. Why don't we postpone the wedding? Edward tried to stop Nora from going wild. I swear, this is definitely the last time. There's no need to reschedule. I got married. And conveniently, I didn't even have to change anything, just the groom's name. To whom? Edward stared at her, dumbfounded. To your best friend Harry. So the wedding took place, Edward, but without you. As you can see, there are no irreplaceables. What are you talking about? How could you marry him if you were going to marry me? Are you talking out of spite to me now? I understand, and I'm not even offended. What right do you have to take offense at me? I didn't leave you, you left me. I didn't dump you, Nora. I love you. In despair, Edward didn't know what other words to use to convince his fiancée that it wasn't his fault. I've decided I've had enough, and I've married Harry. Darling? She took the man under her arm, pressed herself against him. Tell my ex-fiancé we married you? So this isn't a joke? Boiling Edward. You just marry the first guy you meet to spite me? Harry's not a first mate. He's been in love with me a long time, and he's always there for me, unlike you. Get lost. You're not welcome here. Honored guests, let's keep the party going. Harry, is she joking? Edward looked at his friend confusedly. He was silent. I don't believe it. You couldn't do this to me. I love you. It's the resentment in you right now. Yes, I postponed the wedding several times, but not because I doubted my feelings for you, but because I was afraid of losing my freedom. Edward, what's the matter? You're free. You're free from your obligations, from me, from having to get married. No one's going to restrict your rights if that's what you're so afraid of. I'm gonna have a man by my side who's not afraid of responsibility. He didn't have to think about whether or not to marry me. He didn't have to wait, check his feelings, talk about his lost freedom. He went ahead and married me. Harry? Edward turned pale and looked at his friend. I didn't expect you to be so mean. We've been friends since we were kids. I never thought you could do this to me. I was just supporting Nora. The man replied to his friend's attack. I couldn't do otherwise. Seeing her deceived, humiliated was beyond me. And then something happened that no one expected. Edward swung and drove his fist into Harry's face, causing him to fall, his nose bleeding. What have you done? Nora shrieked, rushing over to Harry. "Somebody get me a tissue and call an ambulance." "Don't call an ambulance," the man asked, sitting down on the floor. "There's nothing wrong with me. I lost more than just my fiancé today." Edward looked contemptuously first at one, then at the other. "But also your best friend. I wish you happiness." Edward, rubbing his bruised arm, turned around and walked out of the hall. He didn't remember how he had gotten to the street. He walked swaying, as if drunk, unable to make out the road. When he noticed a bench, he sat down, tore the boutonniere from the lapel of his jacket, threw it in the trash can, grabbed his head, and groaned. "A man?" He heard a voice beside him. "You're not feeling well? Should I call an ambulance? You're not yourself. An ambulance won't help." He looked at the old woman who was staring anxiously at his face. "It's all right. Don't worry. Did you have a fight with your wife?" she asked sympathetically. "Nothing to make up. Who doesn't?" Edward looked sadly at the woman, but said nothing. She stood by him for a while and then walked away. The man got up, caught a cab, and in a few minutes was already entering the entrance of his house. "Now you work like clockwork," he grinned, when the elevator doors opened obligingly in front of him. "Because of you, my whole life has gone down the drain. I lost my fiancée and found out that my best childhood friend was a traitor who took advantage of the situation and married her. How am I supposed to move on with my life?" He stepped out on his floor, opened the apartment door, stumbled through the suitcases in the floor of the dark hallway. "We had to." He grinned bitterly and kicked the suitcases standing in the driveway. To go on a wedding trip with Nora. And now what? Nothing. Now I want to get drunk. Everything collapsed, crumbled like a house of cards. The man went into the living room, took a full bottle of whiskey, a glass, a snack, and sat down on the sofa. "Well, Edward?" He turned to himself, raising the whiskey glass. "You're free again. Only I'm not bloody happy about it." He downed the glass, grimaced, and poured the next one. "Why would I want that kind of freedom? I'm not just free, I'm alone. Why do I need all this? How could I have been so wrong about Nora? How could she even take and just replace one fiancé with another? How could I have been so blind?" On the other hand, he took another sip of the hot drink. "For too long I was going to marry her. Then there's that elevator thing. I can't believe they'd do such a mean thing to me. But they did, didn't they? How am I supposed to go on? I don't understand." He closed his eyes, the empty glass fell out of his hand, and Edward fell into a heavy sleep. In the morning, Nora was awakened by the doorbell. Disheveled, her eyes reddened with tears and sleepless night, she grudgingly went out into the hallway and opened the door. "Hello." Harry was standing on the doorstep. "I'm sorry I'm so early. I couldn't help but come over." "Hi." Nora stepped aside to let him into the apartment. "How are you?" "I'm sorry. I asked a stupid question." He was embarrassed. "I'm hanging in there, as you can see, still alive. Any regrets about yesterday?" "I don't know." She wrapped herself in her robe. "I just wanted to check up on him. I was expecting him to make a scene, to yell, to be indignant, but he believed that I could cheat on him. You saw, he hardly ever swore. Do you understand? He had no doubt in his mind that it was true. And I was stupid, expecting him to meet me at my house and beg me to forget everything, to start again. Or at least call me, but nothing happened. He didn't come, he didn't call. I'd even felt like he didn't care, just walked away. It turns out he never cared about me. Married is good, not married is good. One less thing to worry about. The shame is not that he was late to the marriage ceremony, but that he believed in treason and did not even allow the thought that I deliberately invented everything. You're wrong. I'm sure Edward is very upset about what happened. You're his most precious possession. At least that's how it always seemed to me. I was wrong when I thought he loved me. I imagined that we'd be happy, that we'd be together forever, that we'd make a perfect couple. I pictured in my mind what a good father he'd be. I made plans for the future. God, she covered her face with her hands. How stupid and naive I was. I should have forgotten about him the first time he moved up the wedding date. He said it was temporary, that he was having some problems at work, and he didn't want them to mar our married life. But it was. I know what I'm talking about. Then he postponed the date again, explaining that he was offered an extra job and he wanted to earn more money for our wedding, and a part-time job would not be superfluous, and I believed again. The girl smiled unhappily. You should trust him. You shouldn't have. You should have run away from him then, so that you wouldn't be in such a stupid position now. It doesn't make any difference now, though. She fell powerless into silence, her hands on her knees. Her blue eyes were faded, and the life seemed to have gone out of them. She shook her mop of dark hair. Maybe it's a good thing it happened this way, and I can see now that he doesn't love me. But how am I supposed to live now? I don't know. He was the best thing for me. No one else. I never even thought about. It all happened so fast. Even in my wildest dreams, I couldn't imagine that we'd ever break up with him. It's a shame. Harry said with a sigh, that you love him and not me. I would never have betrayed you. I'd have broken myself to pieces, but I wouldn't have let a single tear fall from your beautiful eyes. You're a very good friend. I'm sorry. Nora looked guiltily at Harry for dragging you into all this. I said the first thing I could think of, just to spite him, but I didn't think he'd believe it. And then he came at you with his fists. She put her hand to the man's cheek, which had a bruise on it. Did it hurt? I'm so ashamed of Edward. So easily and simply doubting you and me, it hurts. I will never forgive him. Nora. Harry took her hands in his. I'm always here for you. If you need help, remember, just call me. I'd do anything for you. Anything you want, I'll do. You know how I feel about you, don't you? Harry, you're so good, but I love Edward and I can't help it. So what's next? If he doesn't call, are you just going to suffer? I'll go. She stood up resolutely. I'll talk to him quietly, explain everything. I think he's already realized that he made a mistake, but he's afraid to admit it. You know he's proud, and then I need to find out if he was really delayed by the elevator. That story sounds too far-fetched. What if it really happened? Then what if I was wrong to be mad at him? Let you down? No, thank you. Nora shook his hand, looking at him gratefully. I'll do it. Thank you so much for your support. It would have been very hard without you. I can imagine how you must be feeling about the fight with Edward. I'm ashamed to be the bone of contention between you two. When I explain it to him, I'm sure you'll reconcile and he'll understand. After seeing Harry off, the girl quickly cleaned herself up and went to her lover's house. She imagined that they would laugh about the accident, hug, Edward would kiss her, and everything would be like it was before. Nora firmly pressed the call button and was answered by silence. Strange, she said thoughtfully. It doesn't open. Where could he have gone? Maybe he went to the store. I'll try calling. She dialed the man's number. No answer? Why? Doesn't want to talk? The girl still stood under the doors and then returned home. There her mother was already waiting for her. Daughter, where have you been? I'm exhausted. Why don't you answer the phone? I turned off the sound. I don't want to talk to anyone. Sorry, even to you, I wanted to be alone." Nora went into the living room without undressing and sank down tiredly on the sofa. "Mom, he's not home. He's not answering my calls. What am I going to do? I feel so bad. Did you go to Edward?" My mother was surprised. "Don't you have any pride left?" I did. I wanted to tell him everything, but I kissed the closed door and came back with nothing. "Well, what did you want? After news like that, any man's gonna lose his temper. It's all right. He'll pout and come back. I didn't think my innocent deception would go this far. I didn't even think he'd believe it. He should have realized that you can't change from one groom to another in a few minutes before registration. He must have been so angry with you that he lost his judgment. He was jealous of Harry, especially since he added fuel to the fire with his declaration of love for you. I didn't even realize he was secretly in love with you, always keeping a low profile with Edward. I don't know what to do." Nora was desperate. "I love Edward. I don't need anyone but him, and he won't even try to talk to me after everything. How do I get him back? How do I make him listen? Mommy?" She rushed to her mother, hugged her. "I don't want to live without him." "Oh, daughter, I'm not a good counselor. If he loves you, he'll come back. Or maybe it was just an excuse to finally let you realize that for him, bachelor life is better than marital duties. There's a kind of man who's not cut out for married life." I don't believe that. This isn't about Edward. Time will tell, but in the meantime, try to calm down. Look at what happened as a test of your feelings, and let him come to his senses. You need a break from each other, and then you'll get together and talk about it. Figure out who's right and who's wrong. "How am I going to get to work?" The girl cried. "You'll have to see him every day." "I don't know how. Should I quit?" "You'll get over it. God put up with it. Smart people will understand and sympathize, but fools talk, and forget. And then maybe things will get better for you." A week later, Nora returned to work. She slowly approached the office. Her heart was racing. As soon as she entered the office, the firm's chief gossip girl immediately flew in. "You're a very good friend. I'm sorry." Nora looked guiltily at Harry. "For dragging you into all this. I said the first thing I could think of, just to spite him. But I didn't think he'd believe it. And then he came at you with his fists." She put her hand to the man's cheek, which had a bruise on it. "Did it hurt? I'm so ashamed of Edward. So easily and simply doubting you and me, it hurts. I will never forgive him." "Nora," Harry took her hands in his, "I'm always here for you. If you need help, remember, just call me. I'd do anything for you. Anything you want, I'll do. You know how I feel about you, don't you? Harry, you're so good, but I love Edward and I can't help it. So what's next? If he doesn't call, are you just going to suffer?" "I'll go." She stood up resolutely. "I'll talk to him quietly, explain everything. I think he's already realized that he made a mistake, but he's afraid to admit it. You know he's proud. And then I need to find out if he was really delayed by the elevator. That story sounds too far-fetched. What if it really happened? Then what if I was wrong to be mad at him? Let you down? No, thank you." Nora shook his hand, looking at him gratefully. "I'll do it. Thank you so much for your support. It would have been very hard without you. I can imagine how you must be feeling about the fight with Edward. I'm ashamed to be the bone of contention between you two. When I explain it to him, I'm sure you'll reconcile and he'll understand." After seeing Harry off, the girl quickly cleaned herself up and went to her lover's house. She imagined that they would laugh about the accident, hug, Edward would kiss her, and everything would be like it was before. Nora firmly pressed the call button and was answered by silence. Strange, she said thoughtfully. It doesn't open. Where could he have gone? Maybe he went to the store. I'll try calling. She dialed the man's number. No answer. Why? Doesn't want to talk? The girl still stood under the doors and then returned home. There her mother was already waiting for her. Daughter, where have you been? I'm exhausted. Why don't you answer the phone? I turned off the sound. I don't want to talk to anyone. Sorry, even to you. I wanted to be alone. Nora went into the living room without undressing and sank down tiredly on the sofa. Mom, he's not home. He's not answering my calls. What am I going to do? I feel so bad. Did you go to Edward? My mother was surprised. Don't you have any pride left? I did. I wanted to tell him everything, but I kissed the closed door and came back with nothing. Well, what did you want? After news like that, any man's gonna lose his temper. It's all right, he'll pout and come back. I didn't think my innocent deception would go this far. I didn't even think he'd believe it. He should have realized that you can't change from one groom to another in a few minutes before registration. He must have been so angry with you that he lost his judgment. He was jealous of Harry, especially since he added fuel to the fire with his declaration of love for you. I didn't even realize he was secretly in love with you, always keeping a low profile with Edward. I don't know what to do. Nora was desperate. I love Edward. I don't meet anyone but him, and he won't even try to talk to me after everything. How do I get him back? How do I make him listen? Mommy? She rushed to her mother, hugged her. I don't want to live without him. Oh, daughter, I'm not a good counselor. If he loves you, he'll come back. Or maybe it was just an excuse to finally let you realize that for him, bachelor life is better than marital duties. There's a kind of man who's not cut out for married life. I don't believe that. This isn't about Edward. Time will tell, but in the meantime, try to calm down. Look at what happened as a test of your feelings, and let him come to his senses. You need a break from each other, and then you'll get together and talk about it. Figure out who's right and who's wrong. How am I going to get to work? The girl cried. You'll have to see him every day. I don't know how. Should I quit? You'll get over it. God put up with it. Smart people will understand and sympathize, but fools talk, and forget. And then, maybe things will get better for you. A week later, Nora returned to work. She slowly approached the office. Her heart was racing. As soon as she entered the office, the firm's chief gossip girl immediately flew in. Nora. Wendy looked at her curiously. When I found out that your fiancé left you, right before the marriage ceremony, I almost went crazy. How could he do that to you? She looked at the girl with sympathy. Poor girl. I probably would have died of grief. But I didn't want to die sorry. I was just speaking figuratively, no offense. I can imagine how you must be feeling right now. What happened? Why did he do that to you? We've had the whole office buzzing for a week, and we were supposed to celebrate your wedding today. How pathetic is that? Tell me, why didn't the wedding happen? I'm dying of curiosity. Did you find out he's seeing someone else? Yes, Edward and I didn't get married, but don't sensationalize the news. Why not? Why didn't we? Because he was late for the wedding. What do you mean he was late? The woman was stunned. Does that happen? As you can see, it does. He was late through no fault of his own. He was on his way to the wedding venue, but he got stuck in the elevator. Really? What a number! Wendy listened avidly to the story of Nora and Edward's breakup, her eyes almost bulging with surprise. So what now? Have you set a new wedding date yet? When? No, we've decided to break up. What do you mean, break up? You two are such a beautiful couple, and you've been together for months. This situation has made us rethink a lot of things. We decided it was best for both of us. Oh, that's a shame. But you two are so right for each other. I'm so sorry. I really sympathize. Breaking up over some stupid incident. Can't you make up? I'm sorry. It's been a busy week. Nora began to study the papers, trying to get rid of the annoying interlocutor. When she had everything she wanted, Wendy ran back to her room. Nora knew that now she would tell her colleagues in detail about the failed wedding, not forgetting to make up something. But she did not care. She caught sympathetic glances, and as soon as she walked into the office, the conversations died down. For a whole week, the entire office plankton had been discussing Nora's personal life. Why don't you ask? Asked a few days later, one of her coworkers, "Where's Edward? Don't you care where he's gone? Or didn't you even notice his absence? I'm not interested in knowing." Nora frowned, though she'd been curious about it for a long time. We were going on vacation, probably still at sea. I'm the one who came back to work early. No, he immediately after your spat wrote an application for transfer to another branch of our firm, and he was transferred. He didn't want to see you to avoid upsetting you more after what he'd done. So you really did not know anything. The woman pretended to be surprised. I was sure everyone knew. I didn't, and I don't care at all where he is now. Coldly, Nora replied, I hope he doesn't come back here again. He left, didn't even say anything, and I was hoping I'd see him and explain everything. Why did he do that to me? God, I'm such an idiot. Why did I just blurt out that I married Harry? Why didn't I listen to him? I attacked him at once, insulted him by mistrusting him. And he's good. She justified herself to herself. He dropped everything and cut me out of his life. Nora? One morning, Wendy met her in the hallway of the firm and gave her a sly wink. There were flowers for you, so I put them on your desk. Such an attentive man, and what a gorgeous bouquet. Flowers? The woman rejoiced, her heart snapped with happiness. It's Edward. He changed his mind and came back. As if on wings, she ran to the office, grabbed the bouquet, pressed it to her chest, buried her nose in the flowers, savoring the fragrance. Then she opened the card and almost cried. Dear Nora, she read. I can't bear to see you suffer. I invite you to dinner at the restaurant tonight. Harry, did you like my present? She heard behind her and flinched in surprise. Yes, thank you. Wiping away tears, Nora answered, turning to the man. She smiled, though she wanted to weep at the top of her voice. The flowers are beautiful. It's my pleasure, but it wasn't worth the expense. Do you accept my invitation? The man asked insistently, not listening to any objections. Harry, the woman hesitated. I'm not in the mood for restaurants, you must understand. I don't feel like going out at all, and after work I have to go home right away. All urgent matters can be postponed for later. I don't take no for an answer. The man said decisively. Edward's gone. You can't stay locked up for the rest of your life. You need to relax a little, take your mind off things. You've had enough of being cooped up like a nun. Let's go out, it's no obligation, just a friendly dinner. I won't ask for anything in return. Can I afford to take a beautiful woman to a restaurant? I guess you're right. After some thought, she agreed. Let's go out because I'm going to go crazy with worry. That's great. Harry was happy. Then I'll meet you in the parking lot right after work. I'm glad you said yes. I wanted to do something nice for you. He took her to the most expensive restaurant in town. I've never been here before. Robia, Nora remarked, looking around at the fancy furnishings. Nora. Harry spoke softly, helping her to a seat at the table. His eyes glittered feverishly. His eyes were filled with desire. I'd do anything for you, and the restaurant is just a little thing, just a good time. Thank you. I appreciate your concern, but I shouldn't have spent so much. She was uncomfortable with the man's insistent stare. Everything here is too expensive. I don't feel comfortable. It's nothing. I should have told you a long time ago, but I didn't dare for fear of hurting you. What do you mean? Nora looked at him in bewilderment. But I can't keep quiet anymore either. It's pathetic to watch you suffer because you've broken up with Edward and he's not worth your little finger. Haven't you forgotten how he treated you? I'll never forgive him for that. How can you say that? Edward is your friend. After all, we're all entitled to make mistakes. I'm wrong too. Yes, he's my friend, but I care about you too. So it's my duty to tell you the truth. I can't keep silent any longer, knowing that you've been deceived all this time. I feel like an accomplice because I didn't say anything to you, because I didn't say anything. I don't know what you mean. Nora got a chill inside. I'm afraid you won't like what I'm about to say. Harry paused for a moment, then continued. Edward has another woman, and she's expecting a child with him. He's been hesitant to tell you, so he's been holding off on the wedding. The elevator was just an excuse to finally break up with you for good. You know he left right away, right? He left with that woman. But they're probably already married because the baby's due soon. Edward, cheating though he was, couldn't leave the baby without a last name. That's why he disappeared so quickly. No, with tears in her eyes, Nora whispered. He couldn't do this to me. I don't believe you. I would have known, felt that he had another. Are you saying this so I won't be so hurt by his betrayal? But you're making it worse. Shut up. I don't want to hear any more about it. I understand. Harry said softly, taking her hands in his. You love him, but he has neglected your love for another woman. And that's the truth he kept from you and demanded my silence. He didn't have the courage to confess his adultery. He ran away like a coward, unable to appreciate your feelings. He's not worthy of your love. I realize you're confused and depressed, thinking you're alone, but you're not. There is a man next to you who is ready to support you, to protect you, to warm you with his warmth. Look at me. Edward's gone and I'm here. What do you want from me? Tears were streaming from Nora's eyes. She hardly knew what was happening. There was only one thought running through her mind. He has another. He's had another woman all this time. Why did I ignore the obvious? Was I afraid to find out the truth? No, it can't be. Edward is incapable of lying. I feel in my heart that it's a deception, a trap. And if it were true, she was tormented by the worm of doubt in her heart. Nora, Harry caught her eye. You know how I feel about you, don't you? If you agree to give me a chance to be there for you, to support you, to comfort you, I will prove that my love is stronger. I'll do anything to make you forget to even think about him. But I don't love you, frankly confessed the young woman. And I don't think I'll ever love you the way I love Edward. Why do you need me? It doesn't matter. Harry hurried on, noticing the change in her eyes. First surprise, then doubt. I assure you that my love is enough for the two of us, and in time you will love me too. Just don't refuse now. Think about it. I'm in no hurry. Promise to think about it. I don't need much. Just to know that I have at least a modicum of hope that I'll feel the same way. And Nora suddenly realized that she needed a man's firm shoulder right now. Harry was so sincere that she believed him. Yes, I promised to think about it. She answered the persistent bow. Thank you. He sighed in relief and started kissing her hands. You don't know how happy I am to hear you say that. I've always been jealous of Edward. Even in my mind, I was afraid to think of you in any other way than as my best friend's fiancé. And now I am free to look at you with tenderness, with love, and no one can stop me from doing so. You are my goddess. I am ready to pray to you. Nora blushed at such words. Harry, you're rushing things. Yes, I am. Because I've lost a lot of time envying other people's happiness, but now I won't miss the opportunity to make you mine. Harry wooed her beautifully. Nora had heard the office gossip about her and Harry's relationship more than once. Look at her. No sooner had the trail of one suitor gone cold than another appeared. She's not the least bit embarrassed to accept his advances. Some people are lucky. You don't know how to get one, but she has 2 suitors at once. What do they see in her? No skin, no face. Don't tell me she's beautiful, stylish. What's wrong with me? What's wrong with me? Maybe she knows some kind of spell for men. Let's ask her. Happy. Harry puts flowers on her table every morning, takes her to restaurants. But I don't think she's very happy about it. She's still pining for Edward. No, Harry's as good a groom as Edward. Nora was uncomfortable with such talk, but she tried to ignore it. There was indeed a bouquet of flowers waiting for her every morning. Why, Harry, why? It's such a waste of money. Don't. It makes me uncomfortable in front of my coworkers. I like it. It's fun, he told her. To please the woman I love, and I don't care about the people around me. You're giving food to the gossip mongers. So what? Let them envy you, but tonight we're going to the theater. He put the tickets in front of her. Harry. Nora shook her hands. It's been 100 years since I've been to the theater. Thank you. I knew you'd like it. The best reward for me is seeing the smile on your face. I'm happy I can take your mind off your sad thoughts for a while. I'm very grateful to you. Nora was embarrassed when, at times like this, Harry tried to hug her and kiss her. She wanted to be more affectionate with him, but something kept stopping her, and in the evenings, alone, she cried into her pillow and remembered Edward's kisses, which gave her goosebumps, as if she were in his arms. Harry had been paying attention not only to Nora, but to her mother as well. What a man! She admired Harry when he once again presented her with a small gift and flowers. Attentive, caring, and he loves you, you can tell. What more do you want? What do you want? That's the kind of man every woman dreams of. Is one better than the other? What do you see in Edward? Where is he now? No one knows. Never heard from, never seen. Vanished, as if he never existed, and Harry's always there. If he proposes, don't you dare refuse. There's no such thing as a man on the prowl. Mama, I don't love him. How can you marry without love? You'd be fooling him and yourself, and then you'd suffer all your life. So what is she going to suffer? There's your love. How did it turn out? Tears and sleepless nights. Have you seen yourself in the mirror? Only eyes left on your face, and they'll soon be tears. The main thing is that the man loved, and you respected him, and then you will not notice how you fall in love. Such a man is easy to love. It was 6 months before Edward disappeared. One day Harry, waiting for her after work, said, I've asked our director for a few days' vacation without your consent. Why? Without looking at the man, Nora asked. I'm not going anywhere. I bought a vacation home. A change of scenery won't hurt you. I can't look at you without crying. And then, he smiled enigmatically. I have a surprise. Shall we go? The hotel's booked. They're waiting for us. By the way, your mom approved the trip. Okay, let's go. With a sigh, the woman agreed. "Just promise me if I don't like it, we'll come back right away?" "Deal," cheerfully the man replied. "But I'm sure you will still be begging me to stay there." Vacation in Sosnovy Bor, on the shore of a picturesque lake, did its job. Nora was revitalized, smiling more often. "How grateful I am to you for bringing me here," the woman confessed once, admiring the sunset. The dark surface of the lake had a calming effect on her. "I knew you'd like it. It's nice and quiet here. No one is whispering behind your back, discussing your personal life. It's a shame we can't stay here forever, but we can always come back." The last night they sat at the restaurant for dinner. "Nora, do you know how I feel about you? I've waited a long time for this moment, and now I've made up my mind." He took a velvet box out of his jacket pocket, opened it, and said solemnly, "Marry me. I promise you will never regret that you said yes to me. I love you very much, and I hope one day you'll say those words to me too. Why aren't you saying anything? Do you agree?" "Yes," Nora answered decisively. "I agree to marry you." Harry rejoiced. He put a small diamond ring on her finger. "My beloved," holding her hands in his and looking at her admiringly, said the satisfied groom. "We have many beautiful days ahead of us without cloudy family happiness. You don't realize what a gift you have given me by accepting my proposal." Nora didn't feel particularly happy about the upcoming wedding. "I'll try to love him in time," she consoled herself. Mama was right. It's a win-win situation. Who else would I wait for? And Harry, here he is, kind, gentle, tender, affectionate. What about Edward? It's a pain in my heart. He's with someone else. I must forget him, erase him from my memory. Nora and Harry had been married for almost a year. He was madly in love with her, trying to win the young woman's affection. He gave her gifts, took her on weekend trips, bought her a car. Alas, Nora did not reciprocate. "I don't see any joy on your face." Her mother was so impressed with her. "Harry would go to pieces to get any sign of attention from you, and you can't get enough. What do you want? Why do you torture him?" "Mom, I don't know why I married him. I don't feel anything for him. It's been a year, and we're like strangers. I think we made an irreparable mistake getting married. He played on my loneliness after I broke up with Edward. I didn't realize what I was doing, and I don't know how to fix it now." "What? Are you crazy? Is this how you respond to his concern? Is it hard for you to be nicer to him? He's a good man, and he deserves your attention. He wants kids. So give him a child. Then the stupid thoughts will go out of your head. You're the one who's doing nothing. When you have a baby, you won't have time to think about silly things. Children bring us closer together. How can I have a child with a man I don't love? Do you want him to be miserable like his parents?" "No, I'd rather be alone. What are you making up?" The mother was indignant. "You're ungrateful. I don't know how Harry still puts up with you. If I were him, I'd have dropped everything and run away." "Mother, how can you talk to me like that? I was hoping you'd be supportive. You're my daughter, but I can't bear to see you both suffer. And it's all your fault. Do you know how many families live without passion for each other? And they have babies. Did you and Dad ever really love each other?" We're different." Mother was embarrassed. "So do I, Mommy. I want to wake up and fall asleep in the arms of a desirable man and not shudder at his every touch. I think I'm gonna go." She immediately got ready and went outside. It was a beautiful spring day. Nora wandered aimlessly through the city, remembering the unpleasant conversation with her mother. "Nora?" Suddenly she heard a familiar voice and shuddered in surprise. "Hello, Edward? Hello. I didn't expect to see you here. I heard you'd gone away. I did, but now I'm back, and I'm very glad to see you. He looked at her carefully, his eyes shining with happiness. How are you living? I'm fine, and you? Can I congratulate you? On what? Perplexed stared at her former fiancé. What did you have, a boy or a girl? What are you talking about? I don't understand you. Harry said you were supposed to have a baby. Edward stared at her, frozen with amazement, and he gradually began to understand her words. I don't know why he thought I was supposed to have a baby, but I think we should talk to you. Don't you think? Yes, you're probably right. The young woman agreed. I'd like to get some answers to some questions. There is a great cafe nearby. I suggest we go there and have a cup of coffee to our chance meeting. In silence, they reached the cafe and ordered. You've lost weight, Pale. Edward noticed. Tell me, how did you know I had a child? When you disappeared without telling me, Harry said you'd gone off with the mother of your child. That all this wedding stuff was just an excuse to get rid of me. What are you talking about? Edward was indignant. I was madly in love with you. Yes, I was afraid of losing my freedom, but that's the fear of a bachelor. I couldn't imagine life without you. How could you even think that about me? Why would I deceive you? I never had any other woman. I only wanted you. And yet, you immediately believed that I changed my fiancé at the marriage ceremony. So you didn't trust me. Jealousy blinded me. I realized later that I was wrong. I realized I had wronged you undeservedly, but I couldn't get over my pride. I was hurt when you refused to believe the elevator story. So we both overreacted? That's what it turns out. I was really sorry I left so soon. I wanted to come back, but I found out you were married. I never would have married if I hadn't known you had another woman. Harry assured me you'd been with her a long time, and then told me you were having a baby. This news completely threw me off balance. I had no reason not to believe him. I was confused, I was all alone, and the resentment I felt for you all blurred. So what do you mean, Harry lied to me? Of course he did. Why would I want some mythical woman? I didn't want to live without you. I was just angry that you chose my friend over me. Anger and jealousy are bad counselors. I chose to run away instead. I realized it too late. I should have trusted you. And I you. But Harry assured me so convincingly that you had another woman a long time ago. Why would I want another woman? Edward asked quietly, taking Nora's hands in his. I still love you. She felt goosebumps run up and down her body at the man's touch. She'd never felt anything like it when Harry touched her. We've wasted so much time speculating about each other and haven't taken the time to sit down and talk. Say. Begging, looking at her, Edward asked, Can you ever forgive me? This year has been like a dream. I've been very unhappy without you. Don't you have any love left in your heart for me? I thought I had fallen out of love with you because you cheated, but now I realize I still can't live without you. Everything between Harry and me was a terrible mistake. Darling, exclaimed the joyful Edward. The cafe patrons looked at him perplexedly. You can't imagine how much I've missed you. I don't want to let you go. I want to kiss you, caress you. Why don't we run away from here? Get a hotel room. Let's do it. Goodbye, laughed Nora. I missed you too. It's a shame we lost a whole year because of stupid grudges, but we can make up for it. Edward looked tenderly at the young woman and could not get enough of her. He caressed every feature of her face with his gaze. Waiter! Keeping his eyes on his beloved, he called out to the young man, Bring the bill. They left the cafe, holding hands, got into a cab, and went to the nearest hotel. There they took a room, turned off their cell phones, and began to enjoy each other's intimacy. Margaret. Entering his mother-in-law's apartment, Harry asked her from the doorstep, "Do you know where Nora is? I can't get through to her. She's turned her cell phone off for some reason. She should have been back by now. I hope nothing's happened. When was the last time you spoke to her? We had a fight. The woman admitted it. And she left. I don't know where she went. I'm going to try calling her myself. It's really disconnected." Margaret looked at the phone receiver in confusion. Maybe the battery's dead, and she's at her girlfriend's. "Did you call them and find out?" "I called all her friends," the man said worriedly. "No one's seen her. I don't know where she could have gone. As long as she's okay, it's not a big deal." Trying to reassure my son-in-law, Margaret. "Maybe she's already home, went for a walk and got held up. You go ahead. If I see her, I'll call you. You can rest assured." "Yes, I think I'll go. Maybe she really is back already. It's still weird that you didn't tell anyone. Just let me know so I don't worry if she comes home." The woman asked. "Okay, I'll keep you posted." Harry returned to the empty house. Nora was gone. He was out of his mind with worry. He was about to run to the police station when the key turned in the lock and Nora appeared on the doorstep. "Where have you been?" Her husband exclaimed indignantly, looking at her indignantly. "I've been looking all over for you. Margaret is worried. I'm not going to report to you." Nora replied calmly, "I'm a free woman. Do I have the right to be alone? You're a married woman, and I'm your husband. I need to know where you've been. You won't be a husband for long." The young woman remarked, "I'm filing for divorce, and this issue is out of the question. Do not try to dissuade. I've already tolerated a whole year, but now I've finally made up my mind. We can't be together." "What?" The man screamed. "Explain to me what happened in the few hours you were away from home." "What fly bit you?" "Are you drunk?" "I met Edward." Nora answered. "He told me everything. It turns out you've been lying to me all this time. He's never had a woman, and he's never been a happy father. Why did you make all that up?" "I don't understand." "You don't?" Harry clenched his fingers into fists, so white his knuckles turned white, his eyes bloodshot. "And I'll tell you, it's all because of you. Edward has always had the best in life: a job, a car, an apartment, a woman. Everything was easy, and I had to make my way through life the hard way. He's the lucky one, and I'm the loser. But now I have the most desirable woman in the world, and no one can stop me. It was worth it. You're my wife. He gave you up, and I'm not going to share you with anyone." "You're crazy," Nora said in horror. Her heart clenched with fear. She was afraid he was going to hit her. "Yes," Harry's eyes burned with feverish fire. "I've gone mad with love for you." "Is that a crime?" "I won't give you to anyone, do you hear? You will stay with me. I won't let anyone else have you. No one will love you as I do. Edward is not capable of that kind of love. You're mine, do you understand? Mine and no one else's. I will destroy anyone who gets in my way. Harry, I don't love you and I never will. I've always been honest with you. Why torture each other? But I love you. That's enough for me. Let me go, please." Nora begged. "We're both suffering." "No way. I won't give you a divorce. You'll stay here with me. And if anyone dares to take you away from me, I will stop at nothing." Nora was scared, not for herself, for Edward. "All right. Calm down, please." The woman realized it was best to backtrack now. "I'm not going anywhere." "Good for you." Satisfied, Harry slowly began to calm down. "Why do you want that traitor?" You think he's changed. You'll thank me for saving you from him. Have you forgotten how much you suffered? How I pulled you out of your depression? No, I won't let him anywhere near you." That evening, after waiting for Harry to fall asleep, she locked herself in the bathroom, turned on the water, and called Edward. If you could have seen it, she told him. "What did he look like when he found out you were back?" "I've never seen him like that." "Do you want me to talk to him myself?" the man asked. "I'm begging you." "Let's just leave it as it is for now, shall we?" she asked. "I'll try to talk to him again, only a little later. He must realize that it's impossible to live with someone you don't love. You could just leave with me." Edward suggested it. "Leave him, let him live his life as he likes. After all, you can get a divorce through the courts. No, I don't want to do that. I've got to get him to sign the petition." Time passed, and Harry never let his wife out of his sight, supervising her at home, at work, accompanying her everywhere. Nora couldn't find the right occasion to talk. "Why are you so pale?" One day Harry asked, concerned about his wife's condition. "I've been sick this morning," she confessed. "Are you ill?" "No, it's something else. I'm pregnant." "You're pregnant." Nora saw her husband's face change. "With what?" "Tell me, bitch." He grabbed her shoulders painfully, pushing her against the wall. "Don't touch me," the woman said warningly. "You yourself always wanted children." "Oh, I see." It suddenly dawned on Harry. "You slept with him." "Cheated on me? How could you get mixed up with that traitor again? After everything I've done for you? What were you hoping for? Did you think I wouldn't find out? Let it be known that I can't have children. I had the mumps when I was a kid. I loved you, but you deceived me, trampled on my feelings, let that scoundrel crush me." "You and great." He swung at her. Nora squirmed, expecting him to hit her, but instead, he slammed the room door with all his might. Shards of broken glass spattered pitifully. "Yes, I cheated on you, and I wasn't going to hide it." Nora looked directly at her husband. "I'm asking you to give me a divorce. Let's part amicably. Let me go. How could I have been so wrong about you?" Harry looked at her with regret. "I thought I was the best of women, and you're just like everyone else. It's all Edward's fault. He has to go away." "Yes, when he's gone, will you stop thinking about him and love me?" "No." Nora shrieked in horror and tried to hold Harry. "You wouldn't dare hurt him." "Stop it, Harry. You're making a terrible mistake. I'll never love you anyway. I was grateful for this year until I found out you told me the truth. How are you better than Edward? Don't you dare compare me to him." Harry roared. "He abandoned you, and I tried to save you." "But it wasn't his fault, and you know it as well as I do." "Oh, so you're protecting him? You're afraid for his worthless life? He'll pay for everything. I won't let him destroy everything I've built. I had a family, a wife I loved, and then this handsome man shows up again. I'm left with a broken home again. But no, I won't let you. I know what I have to do." Nora grabbed his arm, and he pushed her away from him. Furious, Harry grabbed his jacket and ran out of the apartment, slamming the door loudly. Nora grabbed the phone. "Edward, Edward." She kept crying. "Pick up the phone. Please, my love. I wouldn't survive if anything happened to you." But the man didn't answer. "What should I do? I have to warn him somehow. Harry's capable of anything in his condition. What am I supposed to do? I have to go to him." "Right. What am I doing sitting here?" "Cab. Yeah, we should call a cab," she said as she dialed the number of the cab service. "Hello, young lady, would you have a car, please?" The woman gave the address. In a few minutes she was already sitting in the car, Continuing to dial her lover's number from time to time, her anxiety was growing. Not remembering herself, she went up to Edward's apartment. "Oh my God," she said when she saw that the door to the apartment was ajar. "Am I too late?" Her insides were shaking, and on unbendable legs, she strode into the living room and cried out desperately, "Edward, my love." The man was lying on the floor in a pool of blood. She fell to her knees in front of him, fumbling for a pulse, frantically dialing the ambulance number. "Ambulance?" Crying, Nora shouted into the phone. "A man is dying here. Help me, quick!" "Edward, are you alive, my dearly beloved?" The woman stroked his hair, leaned over and kissed him. "Say something, I beg you. Call me back. Don't die. Don't leave me." The man was silent. His face was dead pale. The doctors arrived about 10 minutes later, quickly assessed the situation. "Who are you to the victim?" The doctor asked sternly, "And how did you get into the apartment?" I'm his fiancée. The apartment was open, so I went in. The victim's head is smashed and he's unconscious. I'll have to call the police." "Yes, do what you have to do. You'll have to wait for the police to arrive and tell them what happened. But I didn't see anything. I came in and Edward was already on the floor. You'll still have to explain yourself to the police. We can't stay here. Your friend needs to be in intensive care right away. But I wanted to come with you. Your fiancé is still unconscious. You're more important. Come back later when he comes to his senses." The doctor gave me the address of the hospital. Nora was afraid to be alone in the apartment, afraid that Harry might come back. The young woman flinched when the doorbell rang. "Open up, police." She heard it and opened the door. The police inspected the apartment. They found no signs of forced entry, nor did they find the crime weapon. Who could have done it? The investigator asked her directly. "Do you have any idea?" "I think my husband did it, Harry." "Didn't you say the victim was your fiancé?" "My husband and I were getting a divorce. It's a very complicated story." "Well, interesting." The coroner sat down in a chair in the living room, put his foot on his leg. "Tell me your story, young lady, in detail." Nora told everything, starting with her and Edward's wedding. "So you think your husband might have hit Edward?" "I'm afraid he did." Wiping away her tears, Nora said, "We'd had a fight, and I asked him to give me a divorce. He became furious, threatened, and then ran here. I didn't have time to warn Edward." "And where is Harry now?" "You don't know. Did you call him?" "No, I never saw him again." "Do you have a key to this apartment?" "No. The door was open when I got here." "The landlord must have let him in if the door was intact." Of course, Edward didn't feel threatened because they were best friends. "Okay, we'll figure it out, but you guys be careful. Your husband seems to have some mental issues. Have you noticed any signs of aggression before?" "No, just today. Usually he's always calm and composed. I don't know what's gotten into him. He took the news of the divorce very painfully, but I didn't expect such a reaction from him. I think that kind of aggression, sooner or later, would have manifested itself towards you or someone else. It happens that a person behaves like a perfectly healthy person, but one day a trigger goes off and he can no longer control himself. Apparently, that trigger was the news of the divorce, so you'd better find somewhere to stay until we find Harry. I'm afraid you might be in danger, too." "No." The woman said, "He won't touch me. He loves me too much. I wouldn't be so sure." The man shook his head doubtfully. The investigator left. Nora closed the apartment and drove to the hospital. "You can't see him." A nurse tried to stop her. "He's in intensive care. They won't let anyone in." Leave your number. We'll let you know when the patient comes to. Please, I'm begging you. Will you let me stay with him? I'll be quiet. I won't interfere. I want him to see me first when he opens his eyes. I can nurse him. All right? The girl's given up. Just put on a robe. Make sure you wear a mask, cap, and booties. This is an intensive care unit, and be quiet, or I'll get a beating from the doctor. If he shows up, disappear as soon as I tell you. Okay. Okay, thank you. I'd do anything to stay close to the one I love. Nora sat in the room next to Edward and cried. It's all my fault, she thought. Why? Why did I agree to marry Harry? I didn't love him. I knew I didn't love him. I knew I'd never love him. I let myself be deceived. Fool. All I want is Edward. My darling, she whispered, kissing his hand. Just wake up, please. I love you so much. We're going to live happily ever after, and we'll never part again. I won't let you go anywhere, and I'll trust only you. My darling, my only one. Nora spent the whole night by Edward's side. In the morning, she fell into a restless sleep, dozing in her chair and holding Edward's hand tightly. She woke up every now and then during the night to see if he was awake. Tired, she laid her head in her arms on the edge of the bed and fell into sleep. When she woke up to someone stroking her hair, the woman lifted her head, shook it, shaking off the remnants of sleep, and straightened up. Edward was looking at her, smiling. Are you awake? She breathed out, tears of joy showing in her eyes. How are you feeling? Not bad, just a headache and thirsty. I'll get the doctor right away. Nora jumped up, ran out into the corridor. Nurse, tell the doctor Edward's awake. Wait a minute, I'll give you something to drink. She quickly poured a glass of water and handed it to him. How frightened I was when I found you on the floor in a pool of blood. How did I end up here? I don't remember much. He tried to get up. Lie down, you can't move. The woman stopped him. The doctor will be here in a minute. You'll have to get out of here. A nurse entered the room, looked at the patient. Go home, you need to rest. The doctor will examine him, prescribe treatment, and come back in the evening. I think he'll be able to talk to you by then. Don't miss him. Nora leaned over Edward, kissed him. I'll be right back. I promise not to be long. The woman walked out of the hospital and wondered, where will I go? If Harry is still in custody, it's not safe to go home. To my mother's, but that would mean putting her in danger too. Harry could meet me at her house. Go to Edward's? I don't think Harry will be looking for me there. I've got the keys with me. That's right. It's probably the safest place. As the young woman pondered, the phone rang. Nora, hello. It's the investigator. The man gave his last name. We have your husband in custody. You have nothing to fear. We have him in custody, and he's already confessing. Could you come to the investigative committee? You'll thank me for saving you from him. Have you forgotten how much you suffered? How I pulled you out of your depression? No, I won't let him anywhere near you. That evening, after waiting for Harry to fall asleep, she locked herself in the bathroom, turned on the water, and called Edward. If you could have seen it, she told him. What did he look like when he found out you were back? I've never seen him like that. Do you want me to talk to him myself? The man asked. I'm begging you. Let's just leave it as it is for now, shall we? She asked. I'll try to talk to him again, only a little later. He must realize that it's impossible to live with someone you don't love. You could just leave with me. Edward suggested it. Leave him, let him live his life as he likes. After all, you can get a divorce through the courts. No, I don't want to do that. I've got to get him to sign the petition. Time passed, and Harry never let his wife out of his sight, supervising her at home, at work, accompanying her everywhere. Nora couldn't find the right occasion to talk. "Why are you so pale?" One day Hare asked, concerned about his wife's condition. "I've been sick this morning," she confessed. "Are you ill?" "No, it's something else. I'm pregnant." "You're pregnant." Nora saw her husband's face change. "With what?" "Tell me, bitch." He grabbed her shoulders painfully, pushing her against the wall. "Don't touch me," the woman said warningly. "You yourself always wanted children." "Oh, I see." It suddenly dawned on Harry. "You slept with him." "Cheated on me? How could you get mixed up with that traitor again? After everything I've done for you? What were you hoping for? Did you think I wouldn't find out? Let it be known that I can't have children. I had the mumps when I was a kid. I loved you, but you deceived me, trampled on my feelings, let that scoundrel crush me. You and Great." He swung at her. Nora squirmed, expecting him to hit her, but instead, he slammed the room door with all his might. Shards of broken glass spattered pitifully. "Yes, I cheated on you, and I wasn't going to hide it." Nora looked directly at her husband. "I'm asking you to give me a divorce. Let's part amicably. Let me go. How could I have been so wrong about you?" Harry looked at her with regret. "I thought I was the best of women, and you're just like everyone else. It's all Edward's fault. He has to go away." "Yes, when he's gone, will you stop thinking about him and love me?" "No." Nora shrieked in horror and tried to hold Harry. "You wouldn't dare hurt him." "Stop it, Harry. You're making a terrible mistake. I'll never love you anyway. I was grateful for this year until I found out you told me the truth. How are you better than Edward? Don't you dare compare me to him." Harry roared. "He abandoned you, and I tried to save you. But it wasn't his fault, and you know it as well as I do." "Oh, so you're protecting him? You're afraid for his worthless life? He'll pay for everything. I won't let him destroy everything I've built. I had a family, a wife I loved, and then this handsome man shows up again. I'm left with a broken home again. But no, I won't let you. I know what I have to do." Nora grabbed his arm, and he pushed her away from him. Furious, Harry grabbed his jacket and ran out of the apartment, slamming the door loudly. Nora grabbed the phone. "Edward, Edward." She kept crying. "Pick up the phone. Please, my love. I wouldn't survive if anything happened to you." But the man didn't answer. "What should I do? I have to warn him somehow. Harry's capable of anything in his condition. What am I supposed to do? I have to go to him." "Right. What am I doing sitting here?" "Cab. Yeah, we should call a cab," she said as she dialed the number of the cab service. "Hello, young lady, would you have a car, please?" The woman gave the address. In a few minutes she was already sitting in the car, continuing to dial her lover's number from time to time. Her anxiety was growing. Not remembering herself, she went up to Edward's apartment. "Oh my God," she said when she saw that the door to the apartment was ajar. "Am I too late?" Her insides were shaking, and on unbendable legs, she strode into the living room and cried out desperately, "Edward, my love."